Close your eyes for a moment. Somewhere out there, in a town with no fixed location on any map, the lights are still on. A yellow family is sitting on a couch. The television is playing something. It might be the same episode it was playing last week, or last year, or decades ago. Time does not work the way it should in Springfield. Nothing does. That is actually fine. Because tonight, we are not here to understand Springfield. We are not here to make sense of its contradictions or untangle its decades of impossible continuity. We are here to drift through it. To walk those cartoon streets at a slow, unhurried pace and notice the strange, beautiful details that usually get swallowed up by the laugh track, the odd little moments the writers slipped in at midnight, the background gags that reward a second glance, the philosophical detours that nobody quite expected from a primetime animated comedy. The Simpsons has been running since 1989. That is longer than most wars. Longer than most of its viewers have been alive. In that time, it has produced over 700 episodes, employed thousands of writers, animators, voice actors, and composers, and become one of the most analyzed, quoted, and beloved pieces of pop culture ever made. And yet, after all that time, after all those hours of television, the strangest and most interesting corners of it are the ones that slip through the cracks. The quiet moments. The absurd ones. The ones that do not quite make sense. Those are the moments we are going to visit tonight. So, get comfortable. Let your body settle into wherever you are resting right now. Let your shoulders drop a little. Let your breathing slow down naturally without forcing anything. We are going to take our time. There is no rush in Springfield. There never is. The night is soft. The television glow is warm. And somewhere in that town, something very strange is about to happen, as it always does, as it always has, as it always will. Let us begin. Section 1. The Couch Gag Graveyard. Every episode of The Simpsons begins the same way and ends the same way, except that it never actually does either of those things. The opening sequence, the one with the clouds parting over the town, Bart writing something on the chalkboard that changes every week, Lisa careening down the hallway on her saxophone, Marge and Maggie navigating the supermarket checkout is one of the most recognizable pieces of animation ever made. You could wake someone from a deep sleep and hum 4 notes and they would know exactly what show you were thinking of. That opening theme, composed by Danny Elfman, is practically hardwired into the brains of anyone who grew up in the 90s or early 2000s. It has a kind of Pavlovian warmth to it. It says, "Settle in, the couch is coming, something silly is about to happen." And then the family runs through the door, skids across the living room carpet, and lands on the couch. Except that they do not. Not always. Not even usually, in the later years. The couch gag is one of the oldest running jokes in television history, and it is also one of the strangest creative traditions any show has ever developed. In the early seasons, the gags were simple. The family would arrive and the couch would be broken, or there would be an extra person sitting there, or they would all pile on and get compressed into a single misshapen blob. Harmless stuff. 30 seconds of silliness before the episode proper began. Nobody would have predicted that this tiny sliver of runtime, this little throwaway moment before the story started, would eventually become something that people studied and debated and set aside time to watch on its own. But that is what happened. By the time the show hit its stride in the middle 90s, the couch gags had started to get genuinely ambitious. The animators began treating them as their own miniature creative playgrounds. Some of them became elaborate parodies. Some of them became genuine pieces of experimental animation. A few of them became things that did not really belong in a primetime sitcom at all, things that were closer to art house short films than to set-up punchline comedy. Take the couch gag from season 23, where the opening sequence was handed entirely to the street artist Banksy. If you have never seen it, take a moment to imagine what that looked like. The familiar Springfield skyline rendered in Banksy's distinctive stencil style, followed by a slow, deliberate pan through what appeared to be a third-world animation sweatshop. Children, or the suggestions of children, working assembly lines to produce Simpsons merchandise, a kitten being used as a DVD hole punch, a unicorn chained to a machine, dipping its horn into DVDs to seal them shut. It was dark in a way that made a lot of viewers genuinely uncomfortable, and it was also, there is no other word for it, beautiful. The contrast between that imagery and the cheerful Elfman theme playing over it created something deeply strange. It spread across the internet before going viral was really a common concept for television moments. Or consider the couch gag from season 26, directed by Guillermo del Toro. That one ran for over 3 minutes, practically a short film in its own right. Del Toro crammed it with references to horror cinema and his own filmography, with every frame containing something new to discover. Watching it is like being handed a puzzle box. You could spend an afternoon just cataloging everything hidden in there. The creature from the Black Lagoon peers through one window. The creature from Pan's Labyrinth haunts a doorway. The pale man from the same film sits somewhere you might not notice on first viewing. Every horror tradition Del Toro loved found a home in that sequence. And then there is the Don Hertzfeldt one. If you know Hertzfeldt's work, the hand-drawn animation, the nihilistic humor, the stick figures confronting their own existential emptiness, then you might already know where this is going. In season 27, the opening sequence became a Hertzfeldt creation, and it was unlike anything the show had ever done. The family was drawn in his crude, scratchy style. They glitched and fragmented. Homer appeared as a barely recognizable smear of lines, looking directly at the camera, saying things that did not quite make sense. At one point, the show seemed to critique itself, and the timeline, and the nature of television continuity all at once. It was funny in the way that looking into an abyss is sometimes funny nervously, unexpectedly, with the laughter catching in your throat. Take a slow breath here. These little moments, these 30 to 90-second pockets of weirdness at the start of every episode, are worth lingering on because they represent something genuinely rare in commercial television. They are time that the show's creators used for pure experimentation. Nobody asked for the Banksy couch gag. Nobody in a network boardroom said, "We need something that makes our viewers feel guilty about capitalism" before the episode about Homer getting a new job. It happened because the show had earned enough trust and accumulated enough goodwill that the people making it were occasionally allowed to just try something, to hand the keys to a guest director or an artist and say, "Do whatever you want with 30 seconds. We trust you." That trust produced some remarkable things. There was a couch gag in which the family sat down and was immediately devoured by the couch cushions, swallowed whole in a sequence that kept escalating until the entire universe seemed to get eaten by itself, a kind of cartoon entropy that managed to feel genuinely ominous. There was one where the family arrived to find live-action actors sitting on the couch, and then the animated Simpsons stared at their real-world counterparts with what could only be described as existential unease. There was a Ren and Stimpy-style gag that spent an uncomfortable amount of time on close-ups of squirming, texturally detailed things that had no business appearing before 9 in the evening. Some couch gags were simpler, and those are, in some ways, the most interesting of all. One of the most beloved gags in the show's history involves the family running into the living room and finding themselves already on the couch watching themselves, in an infinite loop that the camera slowly pulls back from until the original family is just a pixel inside a pixel, inside a pixel. It is a 30-second meditation on self-reference and the nature of representation, which is also extremely funny because Homer says something in a tone that perfectly captures the disorientation of suddenly confronting your own infinite regress. Another quietly strange one. The family arrives and finds a note on the couch. Homer reads it. His face falls. No one ever finds out what the note said. The joke is the absence of the punchline. The joke is that you wanted to know, and the show knew you wanted to know, and decided not to tell you. That kind of joke, the withheld punchline, the deliberately incomplete gag, is a signature Simpsons move, and we will come back to it throughout the night. Let your breathing stay slow and easy. The couch gags also tell a kind of unofficial history of the show itself. The early ones from seasons 1 and 2 have a roughness to them. The animation is simpler, the gags less polished, the whole production feeling slightly fragile in the way that all first seasons do. The show had not yet figured out exactly what it was. It was still deciding. You can feel that uncertainty in those early couch gags, in the hesitant way they push against the edges of the format. By season 4 or 5, what most fans consider the beginning of the golden age, the gags had acquired confidence. They moved faster, hit harder, trusted the audience to keep up. They started playing with the format itself in ways that required the viewer to have already internalized the format. You had to know what a couch gag was before you could laugh at a couch gag being subverted. The show was constructing a grammar and then deliberately breaking its own rules, and the audience was sophisticated enough to follow. The Golden Age couch gags say, roughly seasons 4 through 8 have a particular texture to them. They are inventive without being showy. They are quick, and then they are done. There is one where the family runs in and the camera pulls back to reveal they are on a stage set, and then pulls back further to reveal that the stage set is on a bigger stage, and then further still, all the way out to a view of Springfield from space, and then from deep space, and then from whatever is beyond deep space. The whole thing takes about 40 seconds and manages to be genuinely affecting in a way that is hard to explain. There is something about watching the scale of things shift that touches something primal. The feeling of suddenly understanding how small you are, except rendered in yellow cartoon people, so it does not actually frighten you. It just sort of hums. That hum, that strange, comfortable sense of scale and distance, is one of the things that makes The Simpsons such a good companion for the night. The show knows how to make you feel both very small and very cozy at the same time. It gives you Springfield, which is enormous and impossible and contains multitudes, and then it gives you Homer on the couch, asleep in front of the television, which is the most small and specific thing in the world. It oscillates between those two registers, the cosmic and the domestic, with an ease that very few shows ever achieve. And the couch gag is, in a sense, the clearest expression of that oscillation. Every episode, before anything else happens, the show reminds you of its own artificiality. Here is the opening, it says. Here is the couch. Here is the family. And then it immediately does something bizarre with all of those things, as if to say, yes, you know this, and we know you know this, and knowing it does not make it less true or less interesting. The repetition is the point. The variation within the repetition is also the point. There is something almost meditative about watching couch gags in sequence, something you can find on any number of compilation videos. The rhythm of it becomes its own kind of music. Opening bars, family racing in, couch gag, episode title. Opening bars, family racing in, couch gag, episode title. The variations are endless, but the structure is fixed, and there is a comfort in that fixedness. The same way a repeated chorus in a song creates a kind of home base you keep returning to before the verses take you somewhere new. Some of the later couch gags from the past decade or so have become genuinely ambitious in ways that feel like the show trying to remind itself of its own potential. The opening that recreated the first episode's animation style, deliberately ugly and rough, before transforming into the current style, felt like an act of self-archaeology. The one that staged a full Broadway-style musical number, with Homer performing a song about how much he hates going to work, was about 2 minutes long and had backup dancers and a proper key change. It was completely absurd and also sort of joyful, in a way that made you feel like the people making it were having a genuinely good time. And maybe that is the real secret of the couch gags. They are proof that somewhere inside this enormous, long-running, sometimes exhausted machine, there are still people who are in it for the pleasure of making something strange. People who will take 30 seconds of dead air at the start of an episode and turn it into a Banksy piece, or a Del Toro film, or a Hertzfeld meditation on entropy, or a quietly devastating withheld punchline. That spirit, that determination to use even the smallest available space for something unexpected, is what the best of The Simpsons has always been about. We will be spending a lot of time with it tonight. Let your body settle a little more. The couch is comfortable. The television is warm. Springfield is just outside the window. One thing before we continue. If you are watching this late at night or very early in the morning, drop a comment and let us know where in the world you are and what time it is where you are watching from. There is something genuinely nice about knowing that people are drifting off to this in different time zones, in different seasons, in different kinds of darkness. And if this is helping you rest, subscribing takes about 2 seconds and it means a great deal. Section 2: Homer's Brain, the Crayon, and the Fog. There is a recurring joke in The Simpsons that is not really a joke. It appears in different forms across dozens of episodes. Sometimes it is stated directly. Sometimes it is implied. Sometimes it shows up as a throwaway line in a scene about something else entirely. The joke, if we are going to call it that, is this. Homer Simpson used to be smarter than he is now. The first time this idea surfaces in any explicit way is in an early episode called Homer Goes to College, but it becomes something more complicated and more interesting in a later episode, Season 12's HOMR, where it is revealed that as a child, Homer shoved a crayon up his nose, and the crayon penetrated his brain, and that crayon has been lodged in his frontal lobe ever since, suppressing his intelligence to a point somewhere just above functional. The episode is funny. It is also one of the strangest and most melancholy things the show ever produced. When the crayon is removed by a back-alley surgeon working out of a converted garage, Homer's IQ climbs to 105, which is, the episode is careful to note, not genius level. He is not suddenly a super genius. He is just average, slightly above average. He reads books. He starts understanding things that previously seemed opaque to him. He has a nuanced conversation with Lisa about a film they have both seen. He writes a scathing op-ed about the nuclear power plant that gets him fired. He starts to see the world more clearly, and the world, as seen clearly, turns out to be a dispiriting place. The episode ends with Homer choosing to have the crayon reinserted. Take a moment with that. He chooses to be less intelligent. Not because intelligence was hurting him physically, not because the crayon removal had side effects that made his life worse in practical terms, but because the world, as experienced by a person of average intelligence, turned out to be lonelier, more frightening, and more difficult than the world as experienced by the cheerfully oblivious Homer he had always been. The happiness he felt was not a product of his circumstances. It was a product of his inability to fully process his circumstances. And he decides deliberately, with full awareness of what he is doing to restore that inability. It is one of the bleakest things any primetime animated show has ever done, and it is framed entirely as a comedy. But the episode does not end on pure bleakness. Before the crayon goes back in, Homer leaves a note for Lisa. He writes it while he is still intelligent enough to articulate what he is feeling. The note says something like, "I know I will forget what I understood this week. I know I will stop being able to connect with you the way I have. But I want you to know that I saw it while I could. I saw how brilliant you are. And that matters to me even if I will not be able to hold on to it." Lisa finds the note afterward, after Homer has already reverted to his usual state, and she cries. The audience cries, and then the episode ends, because what else can you do after that? Let your breathing slow here. The crayon episode is unusual for how directly it engages with something that most long-running shows try to avoid acknowledging, the fact that their main character is a specific kind of fool, and that his foolishness has a cost. Most shows that build around a lovable idiot treat the idiocy as a neutral character trait. Homer is dumb the way Kramer is eccentric. It is a flavor, not a tragedy. But the crayon episode insists that it is a tragedy. That there was another Homer, a potentially realized version of himself, who never got to exist because a child did something careless in 1968, and the consequences lasted a lifetime. And that this other Homer is not gone, he is in there, suppressed but present, occasionally glimpsed in moments when something breaks through. This idea, the Homer behind the Homer, creates one of the show's most interesting recurring elements, which is the depiction of Homer's interior mind. Over the course of the series, we have seen Homer's brain depicted in several different ways. Sometimes it is a literal visualization, actual neurons firing, or a tiny Homer sitting at a control panel inside his own head, making decisions with the confidence of someone who has no idea what he is doing. Sometimes it is a caveman Homer responding to stimuli from a prehistoric posture. These gags are played for laughs and they are funny, but they accumulate into something more unsettling the more you think about them. They suggest that Homer's consciousness is not a unified thing, that there are multiple Homers operating at different levels, with different degrees of awareness, making different kinds of decisions, occasionally contradicting each other. One of the most famous examples is the exchange between Homer and his own brain during a moment of temptation. Homer wants to do something he knows is wrong, eat the forbidden donut, touch the thing he should not touch, make the choice that will clearly lead to disaster, and his brain says, "No, Homer, remember what happened last time." And Homer says, "That was a lie and you know it?" And his brain says, "Okay, fine." And Homer does the thing. The joke is fast. It takes maybe 4 seconds, but it contains a complete model of human self-deception, the awareness of the consequence, the negotiation with that awareness, the convenient abandonment of it. And it is delivered through a conversation Homer is having with himself, as if his brain is a separate entity that he occasionally argues with and usually wins against, because he is, after all, technically in charge of his own brain, and his brain knows that. What is strange is that Homer's brain sometimes seems more capable of insight than Homer himself. There are moments scattered through the series, easy to miss if you are not looking for them, where Homer demonstrates a kind of accidental wisdom, where he says something that sounds foolish and turns out to be true, where his apparent obliviousness turns out to be a kind of practiced serenity, a deliberate not engaging with the anxiety-producing parts of the world. It is never entirely clear how much of this is a writing inconsistency and how much is intentional depth. The Simpsons has never been a show with fully coherent internal logic that is part of the point, but the Homer brain question is particularly slippery. Is he smart and hiding it? Is he genuinely limited but occasionally touched by grace? Is there a version of intelligence that looks like stupidity from the outside and functions just fine from the inside? The crayon suggests the last option. With the crayon in place, Homer is happy. His relationships are warm, if occasionally strained. He loves his family in a way that is genuine and expressed, even if not always competently. He finds joy in small things: donuts, television, sleeping, cold beer with an enthusiasm that a more anxious or sophisticated person might struggle to achieve. His happiness is not complicated. It does not require much maintenance. It runs on a simple fuel. The question the episode leaves hanging, the one that never quite resolves, is whether that happiness is real, whether happiness that depends on not fully knowing your situation counts as happiness at all, whether the fog that makes the world manageable is a mercy or a loss. Let that question sit there in the soft dark. You do not have to answer it tonight. The fog metaphor is worth staying with for a moment, because it shows up in the show's visual language in interesting ways. Springfield is often rendered with a particular kind of atmospheric haziness, a slight softness to the backgrounds, a warmth in the light that makes everything feel slightly unreal, slightly cushioned from the sharp edges of actual life. This is partly just the aesthetic of the show. It is a cartoon, and cartoons use simplified, softened environments as a matter of practicality, but it also serves a thematic function. It makes Springfield feel like a place seen from inside a pleasant dream, sharp enough to be recognizable, soft enough to be safe. Homer moves through that fog without noticing it. He lives in it the way a fish lives in water. He does not register the strangeness of his environment because he is native to it. But viewers who are watching from outside, who are using the show as a window onto a world they do not inhabit, can feel the fog differently. It is the fog of nostalgia, the fog of warmth, the comfortable haze that settles over anything you have watched enough times to love. There are other Homers in the fog, too. The Homer who used to have hair, shown in childhood flashbacks, is a more hopeful version of the character, rounder and softer, not yet shaped by disappointment. The teenage Homer, glimpsed in episodes that explore his courtship of Marge, is recognizably the same person, but not yet fixed in his patterns. He is still becoming something, still capable of surprising himself. The choice he makes to be with Marge, to take responsibility, to stay, shapes everything that follows, including the fog. And then there is the Homer of the future, glimpsed in several flash-forward episodes. In some of these, he is happy in a weathered way. In others, he is a cautionary tale. In Lisa's wedding, one of the most beloved future set episodes, he has gotten slightly heavier and slightly slower. But he is recognizably himself, and the love between him and Lisa is intact, and the moment when she realizes she does not want to marry someone who embarrasses her feels genuinely sad because you understand what she is giving up. The episode is not really about her fiancé. It is about what it costs to grow up and away from the people who raised you. Future Homer is always the same Homer. He does not change in ways that suggest growth. He changes only in the directions that repetition and time take you slower, softer, more settled. It is a gentle vision of aging, and it fits the fog. He will always be on that couch. He will always be reaching for the donut. He will always be arguing with his brain and usually winning. Let your eyes stay closed. Let the warmth of the fog settle around you. The crayon is still in there, in the Homer we know, in the Homer the show gave us back after the brief experiment of home. And maybe that is the right ending, even if it is a sad one. Because the Homer without the crayon, the Homer with 105 IQ, reading books and writing op-eds was unhappy in a specific, crystalline way, he saw his life too clearly. He understood his limitations too precisely. He felt the distance between what he was and what he might have been, and that distance was painful. The Homer we love is protected from that distance by approximately one Crayola crayon, lodged somewhere in the left frontal lobe, doing the only job it has ever been asked to do, making the world a little softer around the edges. And late at night, when the house is quiet and the television is still on and the fog is settling in, that seems like it might be enough. Section 3. The Treehouse of Horror Rabbit Hole. Every October, The Simpsons does something it is not supposed to do. The show suspends its own rules. The characters can die. The tone can shift into something genuinely dark. The plots do not have to resolve, and the resolutions do not have to be comforting. Permanent things can happen, and then not happen. Because the episode exists in a separate continuity, a shadow Springfield, adjacent to the real one, where the nightmare logic is allowed to run unchecked. These are the Treehouse of Horror episodes, and they are some of the strangest, most varied, and most fascinating things the show has ever produced. The tradition started in Season 2 in 1990 with an episode that framed 3 horror-adjacent stories as tales told by the children in their treehouse on Halloween night. The framing device gave the show permission to do things it could not do in regular continuity. It allowed for actual horror, not just spooky imagery, but real darkness, real menace, real consequence. And it allowed for the kind of comedy that only works when the stakes have been raised. The joke that is funny precisely because something genuinely terrifying just happened. The first Treehouse of Horror had 3 stories. One was a haunted house story with a surprising amount of genuine atmosphere, a house that did not want the Simpsons to leave, and made its preferences known through escalating supernatural violence, until Homer vetoed the family's decision to flee because the house had a good deal and the neighborhood seemed fine. One was a riff on The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, narrated by James Earl Jones, with Homer as the narrator tormented by Bart as the Raven, which managed to be both very funny and genuinely respectful of the source material. The third story took the family to space, where friendly aliens turned out to be harvesting them as food, a classic Twilight Zone structure, delivered with Simpsons efficiency. That first episode established the template. 3 distinct stories, each with a horror or science fiction premise. Each played somewhere between genuine menace and broad comedy, and each animated with slightly more care and ambition than the regular episodes of that era. Over the decades that followed, the Treehouse of Horror episodes accumulated into something remarkable, a parallel history of the show, told in nightmare form. There are now over 30 of these specials. If you line them up end to end, they would constitute a substantial body of work entirely on their own. Let your breathing settle. The darkness outside is comfortable. This is all cartoon dark, the kind that flickers at the edge of things and dissolves when the lights come on. The early Treehouse episodes, roughly the first 8 or 9, are considered some of the best television the show ever made. Part of what makes them so good is the way they use the horror format to access emotional registers that the main show could not quite reach. Horror, as a genre, is very good at externalizing interior anxieties. The monster at the door is always also the fear of something. The house that eats you is always also the dread of a place you cannot escape. The Treehouse episodes understood this and used it with precision. The Shining Season 6's parody of Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining is perhaps the most celebrated individual segment in the show's history, and for good reason. It manages to be both a pitch-perfect parody of the film and a surprisingly tense piece of horror in its own right. Homer's descent into violence, here triggered by the absence of beer and television, is played as comedy. No TV and no beer make Homer something, but it is also genuinely unsettling in the way that Nicholson's performance in the original is unsettling. There is something in the delivery of those lines, something in the slightly off quality of Homer's cheerful violence that produces an authentic chill alongside the laughter. The episode is also notable for one of the show's great structural jokes. Groundskeeper Willie appears in all 3 stories of that episode in the role of the helpful figure who gets killed in the second act. He appears, he offers to help, he says, "I will save ye," and then he is immediately killed. The repetition of this gag across 3 different stories, Willie appearing, Willie offering help, Willie dying in some fresh, horrible way, is a perfect example of how the show uses structure as punchline. By the 3rd time, you are already laughing before Willie finishes his sentence, because you know what is coming, and knowing what is coming is somehow funnier than not knowing. But the Treehouse episodes go darker than The Shining. They go considerably darker. Season 9's Fly versus Fly, based on the Cronenberg film and the original short story, involves Bart accidentally merging himself with a housefly in one of Homer's teleportation experiments. The segment plays this for laughs, mostly, but there is a sequence near the end where the fly version of Bart has almost completely taken over, and the human part of Bart is tiny and frightened, and desperately trying to get back to himself. It is played quickly, but it resonates, because the show has earned its version of Bart over 9 seasons at this point, and watching him be unmade, even temporarily watching the cartoon logic of his personality get dissolved into something insectoid, creates a genuine unease beneath the comedy. Or there is the segment The Genesis Tub from Season 8, in which Lisa accidentally creates a microscopic civilization in a petri dish. The civilization evolves rapidly, discovers fire, religion, war, and then looks up at the giant face above them and calls her God. And then Bart destroys the civilization with a spitball while Lisa is not looking, and the episode moves on to the next gag. The segment is a fairly standard condensed evolution joke, delivered with Simpsons efficiency. But there is a quiet horror underneath it. The horror of being responsible for something you did not intend to create, of having power over things you did not consent to have power over, of watching something you cared about be destroyed by someone who does not understand its value. These are not feelings that belong exclusively to Halloween episodes. They are feelings that parents have, that anyone has, who has ever loved something fragile. The Treehouse of Horror episodes are particularly interesting for what they reveal about the show's relationship with death. In regular Springfield, characters do not stay dead. They cannot. The show's continuity depends on a kind of immortality. Nothing that happens in one episode can permanently alter the status quo, because the status quo needs to be there for the next episode. But in the Treehouse episodes, death is possible. Characters die constantly, sometimes in elaborate and creative ways. Homer dies in the first segment of nearly every Halloween episode at some point in the show's history. Bart has died, Lisa has died, the entire family has died multiple times over. And yet the show plays these deaths with a kind of lightness, a cartoon lightness, that makes the dying okay, that makes it part of the game. When Homer is killed by whatever the monster of the week happens to be, there is a quick cut and then a new scene, and Homer is alive again, and nobody mentions what happened, because the Treehouse continuity does not carry over into the regular show. Death in this context is the death of a dream, immediate, complete, and gone by morning, which makes it surprisingly relaxing to witness. Let your shoulders drop a little more. The tradition of the Halloween episodes also gave the show space to experiment with visual styles in ways that the regular show could not always justify. Some of the Treehouse segments have a markedly different visual tone from the show's standard aesthetic, darker palettes, more distorted character designs, backgrounds that feel genuinely menacing rather than cheerfully simplified. There are segments that look, for brief moments, more like Ralph Bakshi or early Don Bluth than standard Simpsons, something raw and more expressive moving through the frame. These visual experiments rarely get enough attention. People discuss the jokes, the references, the memorable kills, but the animation in the best Treehouse segments is quietly remarkable. The moment in Dial Z for Zombie when the zombie Simpsons family shuffles toward the audience is animated with an attention to slow, wrong movement that actually manages to be unsettling. The visual language of horror, the deliberate wrongness of something that moves or sits or looks in a way that should not be possible, was used carefully and well, particularly in the early seasons. There are also Treehouse segments that abandon horror entirely in favor of something weirder and harder to classify. Season 5's Time and Punishment, in which Homer repeatedly breaks a toaster he is trying to fix, and each repair sends him into a different alternate timeline, is science fiction comedy, not horror at all. It is loosely based on a Ray Bradbury short story, but it quickly escapes that structure and becomes its own strange thing. Homer visits timelines in which the family is incredibly wealthy, and then timelines in which Ned Flanders is the benevolent dictator of the world, and then a timeline in which everything seems perfect until it becomes clear that donuts do not exist. Homer's response to this, his anguished cry of, "No, it's the one thing I asked for," is one of the single funniest moments in the show's history. But what lingers is not the joke. What lingers is the image of Homer standing in a doorway, looking at a world that is perfect by every measure except one, and deciding that the one thing matters more than everything else. It is absurd. It is also a completely recognizable piece of human psychology. We all have our donut. We all have the one non-negotiable thing that we would trade almost anything for. The time travel structure of that segment also produces one of the show's most affecting images. Homer arriving at what appears to be his actual home, his actual timeline, and seeing Bart and Lisa and Marge, and feeling the specific relief of having found his way back. The joke is that it turns out to be a slightly wrong timeline. Everyone has lizard tongues, just briefly, and he decides it is close enough, which is funny. But the relief that came before the joke was real. You felt it too, because you have been traveling through wrong timelines with him for 10 minutes, and coming home, even a slightly wrong home, felt good. The Treehouse of Horror episodes are, in a strange way, the show at its most alive. They are the episodes where the show's deep familiarity with itself becomes most useful, where you can feel the writers taking genuine pleasure in violating the rules they have spent years establishing. The monsters who chase Homer are funnier because you know Homer. The deaths land harder because you know what the family is supposed to be. The darkness is more affecting because it is surrounded by so much warmth. By this point in the night, the darkness outside your window is doing something similar. It has a specific texture, the texture of a night that has been going on for a while, that has settled into its own quiet rhythms. The sounds that seemed sharp an hour ago have softened. The small noises of your space, the house breathing, the hum of something electrical, the distant suggestion of the world going on without you, have become a kind of music. The Treehouse of Horror episodes know that feeling. They were always designed to be watched in the dark. Let yourself settle into the dark. It is safe here. It is cartoon dark. It is the kind that dissolves by morning. Section 4. Springfield's Strangest Side Characters. Springfield is a town with approximately 500 permanent residents and a revolving door policy on everyone else. The core cast of The Simpsons, Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, Maggie, and the major recurring characters like Ned Flanders, Montgomery Burns, Chief Wiggum, Principal Skinner, and a handful of others represents only the most frequently visited portion of the town. Behind them, filling in the background, populating the diners and churches and DMV offices and unemployment lines, is a vast crowd of supporting characters who are remembered for specific things: a face, a voice, a catchphrase, a recurring situation. Some of these characters have become beloved in their own right. Comic Book Guy, Sideshow Bob, Groundskeeper Willie, Dr. Nick, Professor Frink, Disco Stew. Each of them was a single-use background player who became, through some combination of writing and performance and audience reception, something more lasting and more interesting than the show originally intended. But for every character who made it to that level of beloved recurring status, there are dozens who did not. Characters who appeared in 2 episodes, or 1 episode, or half an episode, and were never seen again or were occasionally glimpsed in crowd scenes, frozen in the background, reduced to visual shorthand. These are the characters who haunt the edges of Springfield, the ones whose stories the show never quite got around to telling. Let us visit some of them. Take a slow breath and let the imagery form behind your closed eyes. A small town, yellow-tinged late at night. The shops are closed, the streets are empty. But if you look closely, you can see lights on in windows. Lives in progress. Stories the camera is not following. One of the most interesting peripheral characters in the show's history is Leon Kompowski, the man who claims to be Michael Jackson in the Season 3 episode Stark Raving Dad, which was for many years one of the show's most unusual and most debated installments. He appears as a large white man whom Homer meets in a mental institution, and who insists, quietly and with complete sincerity, that he is Michael Jackson. He sings. He helps Bart write a birthday song for Lisa, and then, at the end of the episode, he reveals that he is not Michael Jackson at all. He is just a man from New Jersey who found that claiming to be a celebrity made people treat him more gently, more generously, more like someone who mattered. The episode is funny and warm and slightly heartbreaking. It was voiced in part by Michael Jackson himself, credited pseudonymously. And the question it leaves behind: why do we treat people differently when we think they are famous? What would change if we gave strangers the same generosity we give to celebrities? Is one the show rarely returned to but never entirely abandoned? Leon disappears after that episode. He is cured, or he returns to the world, or he finds something else. But the idea of him, the gentle, delusional man singing a birthday song for a little girl he barely knew, who happened to be the daughter of the first person who treated him like his claim was real, stays. Or consider Lurleen Lumpkin, the country singer Homer manages in Season 3. She is a genuinely good musician, not just a gag. Not just a prop for Homer's plot, and her feelings for Homer are treated with a care that the show does not always extend to its guest characters. She writes songs about him. She performs them in bars with terrible acoustics in front of audiences who do not quite understand them. She does not end up with him, because Marge is there and the show loves Marge, but she does not disappear bitterly either. She simply goes back to her life, to her music, to whatever was there before Homer arrived, and briefly turned her trajectory sideways. Lurleen comes back occasionally in later seasons, and she is always recognizably herself, a little sadder, a little wiser, still writing songs about things she probably should not have wanted. She is one of the characters who demonstrates that Springfield's background population has a depth that the show does not always take the time to map. She had a life before Homer, and she has one after. Her story continues off-screen in ways the show never explains. Let yourself breathe. The town is full of lives like this, full of people whose main stories happen between the episodes, in the spaces the camera does not follow. Disco Stew is worth spending a moment with, because he is one of the purest cases of a joke that became a character that became something almost poignant. He appeared initially as a visual gag, a man in a 70s suit who appeared at a discount store sale and announced himself as a creature of pure 70s nostalgia. His name is Disco Stew because his original jacket had Disco Stud written on it in iron-on letters, but the D fell off, so he became Disco Stew. The show never lingered on this origin for very long. Disco Stew exists, and he is entirely committed to the bit, and Springfield accepts him the way Springfield accepts all of its eccentrics, without comment, without therapy, without any particular effort to help him update his sense of self. He lives in 1975, more or less, and this is fine. This is his equilibrium. What makes Disco Stew interesting, what elevates him from pure visual gag, is the occasional glimpse of his interior life. There are moments scattered across the series where you catch him doing something that suggests an inner world, a look of genuine wistfulness when he watches something that was contemporary in the 70s, or a moment of uncertainty when confronted with a present day that has no use for disco. These moments are quick. The show does not dwell on them, but they accumulate, across decades of appearances, into something resembling a portrait. He chose this. He woke up one morning in 1985 or 1990 or whenever it was, and he decided that the person he wanted to be was the person he already was in 1975, and he is committed to that decision with a loyalty that is either tragic or admirable depending on how you look at it. Springfield respects this, in its way. It lets Disco Stew be Disco Stew. It does not try to update him. There is a lesson in there somewhere, but it is a soft lesson, the kind you absorb without meaning to. Professor Frink is a character who gets more interesting the more attention you pay to him. He is the show's archetypal scientist, manic, distracted, speaking in a voice that cascades between registers without warning, constantly on the verge of discovering something that will change everything and then losing his train of thought. The catchphrase is a kind of verbal tick, Glavin appended to sentences for reasons that are never explained and do not need to be. The character has a name that references a Mel Brooks collaborator, but Frink himself has drifted far from that origin into something the show owns entirely. What is strange about Frink is that his science is almost always correct. Not in the way that television science is usually correct, where the smart character says something that sounds impressive and is accepted uncritically by the audience, but actually correct, or at least plausible. The show's writers, who included several with genuine science backgrounds, generally gave Frink real scientific problems to engage with. His inventions occasionally work, his predictions occasionally pan out. There is a version of Springfield in which Professor Frink is the most important citizen in town, the person whose work keeps the infrastructure running, and nobody quite knows it because he is too distracted to explain what he is doing. His relationship with his father, introduced in a Treehouse of Horror segment, is one of the show's warmest and strangest minor subplots. Frink Sr., who appears as a reanimated zombie, turns out to be approximately as chaotic as his son, but in different directions, and their dynamic, the fussy, anxious son, The blustering undead father plays like a domestic comedy that happens to involve brain eating and the question of whether parental love survives physical death. The answer the episode gives is, more or less, with some adjustments. Frank's loneliness is occasionally touched on and then quickly abandoned. He is not, as far as we can tell, in a sustained relationship. His social life seems to consist primarily of attending scientific conferences and being misunderstood by peers who are also scientists, but who lack his specific combinatorial genius. His moments of joy are mostly intellectual, the flash of discovery, the satisfaction of a proof, the moment when the apparatus does exactly what he designed it to do. Springfield has him but does not know quite what to do with him, which is perhaps the fate of every inventor. Let your mind wander through Springfield's streets for a moment. There is Moe's Tavern, closed now, the neon sign buzzing faintly. There is the Quickie Mart, probably still open. There is the school, dark and locked. There is the nuclear plant, with its 2 cooling towers visible against the sky, always vaguely ominous, always just barely managing not to melt down. And there, in a window somewhere, is a light on. A minor character, living their minor life. Breathing in and out, doing what people do when the main characters are not watching. One of the most affecting minor characters in the show's history is Frank Grimes, who appeared in a Season 8 episode so bleak and uncomfortable that many fans consider it a masterpiece and others find it completely unwatchable. Grimes is a man who has had a hard life, genuinely hard, in the way that Homer's life has never been, and who has, through hard work and persistence and genuine intelligence, earned employment at the same nuclear plant as Homer. Grimes is competent. He is professional. He is everything Homer is not. And Springfield, which has long since adjusted its standards to Homer's level, cannot accommodate Grimes's competence. The world that rewards Homer, that allows him to drift through life in cheerful obliviousness, succeeding by accident, failing without consequence, has no use for Grimes's careful effort. The joke is that this is unfair. The terrible part is that it is also accurate. Grimes eventually has a breakdown. He decides that if the rules do not apply to Homer, they do not apply to anyone, and he behaves accordingly, and he dies. And at his funeral, Homer falls asleep and shouts something in his sleep and everyone laughs. The episode is called Homer's Enemy, and it is the only episode of the show that feels, throughout, like a horror film. Not because anything supernatural happens, because the world it depicts is completely real, and in that real world, Homer wins and Grimes loses, and that is just how it goes. But even Grimes, in his brief appearance, has an interiority that makes him more than a gag. He has a history. He has ambitions. He has a specific way of carrying himself, a careful, effortful dignity that makes his unraveling more distressing than it would be if he were just a placeholder. The show gave him enough to make you care, and then took him away. That is The Simpsons at its most honest. The side characters live on the edge of things. Sometimes they get a spotlight. More often they drift through the background, yellow-skinned and four-fingered, living their cartoon lives in the periphery of a story that is not quite theirs. But they are always there. The town is full of them. And late at night, when the camera is not running, they are doing something, living something, being something that the episodes never quite captured. Springfield breathes. The lights are on in the windows. The minor characters are all awake, living their minor lives, while the major characters sleep. And so can you. Section 5. The show within the show. The Simpsons has always been fascinated by television. This makes sense. The Simpsons is television. It exists on television. It was made for television. Its characters watch television. Their world is organized around television schedules and television logic, and the particular kind of passive warmth that television generates in a room at night. The show's relationship with the medium that carries it has always been reflexive, always slightly aware of its own condition, always interested in what television does to the people who watch it and the people who make it. This reflexive quality produces one of the show's most interesting recurring elements, the shows within the show. Springfield has its own television landscape. It has its own late-night hosts, its own game shows, its own children's programming, its own local news team, its own public access channels. These inner shows have their own characters, their own aesthetics, their own internal logic, and they accumulate across hundreds of episodes into a kind of shadow Simpsons, a parallel television universe that runs inside the main universe, reflecting it back in distorted form. The most prominent of these inner shows is Itchy and Scratchy. If you have watched any amount of The Simpsons, you know the basic premise. A mouse and a cat engaged in an endless cycle of cartoon violence, each episode escalating the mayhem to new extremes, with Scratchy the cat always dying in some elaborately gory way, and Itchy the mouse always escaping, and the children of Springfield, Bart and Lisa, primarily watching with wide, delighted eyes. The show is an explicit parody of Tom and Jerry, but it is also a meditation on cartoon violence in general, on the relationship between what children consume and what they enjoy and what it does to them. The show within the show format allows The Simpsons to comment on its own medium without directly implicating itself. Itchy and Scratchy is the cartoon that does the violence. The Simpsons is just showing you a cartoon that shows you a cartoon. But Itchy and Scratchy is stranger than that simple parody would suggest. Over the course of hundreds of appearances, it has developed its own internal continuity, its own running gags, its own history. The show has been canceled and revived within the world of The Simpsons. It has been protested by parent groups, it has been subject to focus group testing and market research and network interference. It has added new characters, most infamously Poochie, the skateboarding dog voiced by Homer, who died on the way back to his home planet and was never mentioned again and then removed them. It has been used as a vehicle to explore the creative economy of children's entertainment in ways that are both funny and genuinely pointed. The Poochie episode, The Itchy and Scratchy and Poochie Show, from Season 8 is one of the most sophisticated things the show ever did. It is a satire of network interference in creative decisions, of the tendency of executives to improve something that is working by adding elements that audiences did not ask for. Poochie is a Frankenstein of market-tested attributes. He is in your face, he is on the edge, he is totally outrageous. He is everything that focus groups said they wanted, and nothing that any child actually finds interesting. He fails immediately and catastrophically. What makes the episode brilliant is that it implicates the viewer. The joke is not just on the executives who created Poochie. The joke is also on audiences who complain about shows changing and then also complain when they do not change. The joke is on the machinery of reaction, the way that any response to a cultural product, positive or negative, immediately becomes data that the product's creators have to navigate. Poochie exists because someone was trying to give people what they wanted. He fails because what people want and what people actually enjoy are not the same thing, and the gap between those two things is where most creative disasters live. The episode ends with Homer's character being killed off, and the announcement that Poochie will never be mentioned again. And then the episode does mention Poochie again. A child watching the show says they will never bring Poochie back, which means the show is winking at the convention of itself, at the way television always finds a way to bring things back when it thinks nobody is watching. Let your breathing slow. There is also Krusty the Clown, who functions less as a show within the show and more as a television empire that happens to have a clown at its center. Krusty runs a children's variety show, and that show has its own aesthetic, a kind of manic, low-budget cheerfulness that occasionally breaks down to reveal the nihilism underneath, but around the show, Krusty has built a brand. The Krusty Burger franchise, the Krusty merchandise, the Krusty spin-offs and specials. What is interesting about Krusty is that his private self, the man underneath the makeup and the wig, is almost nothing like his television persona. The public Krusty is energetic, enthusiastic, loud, performatively warm toward children. The private Krusty is depressed, chain-smoking, deeply cynical about his own audience, and occasionally willing to do things on television that he knows are harmful because the money is good. This gap between public persona and private reality is one of the show's recurring preoccupations. It shows up everywhere in Burns' relationship with the town, in Skinner's relationship with authority, in Flanders' relationship with his own faith. But Krusty makes it most visible, because the gap is literally made of grease paint. Every time the makeup comes off, the show is showing you the gap. Every time the makeup goes on, the gap is filled in again. The Krusty-Bart relationship, which is really an obsessive parasocial devotion on Bart's part and a loose professional awareness on Krusty's, is one of the show's strangest emotional threads. Bart loves Krusty the way children love celebrities, unreservedly, without reciprocation, investing the object of love with qualities they may not possess. When Krusty is framed for robbery and Bart unmasks the real criminal, it is not just about clearing an innocent man, it is about protecting the image. It is about refusing to let the thing you love be taken from you by a fact. Krusty, for his part, is occasionally touched by this devotion. There are moments when he glimpses what Bart has given him: the attention, the loyalty, the willingness to believe, and feels something that might be gratitude, or guilt, or a distant warmth that he does not quite have the emotional vocabulary to name. These moments are brief. The show does not linger on them, but they accumulate across years of episodes into something resembling a portrait of what fame costs and what it occasionally, accidentally, gives back. The local news in Springfield is another show within the show that develops its own texture over time. Kent Brockman is the anchor, a former serious journalist who has long since settled into the easy comforts of local celebrity, who reads whatever teleprompter is in front of him with sonorous conviction, and who will pivot immediately to any story that seems likely to generate panic. His coverage of ant attacks, power outages, and inexplicable Springfield weather events always carries the same tone: grave, authoritative, and completely uncritical of its own hysteria. Brockman is perhaps the show's most direct commentary on broadcast news. He is not malicious. He does not seem to know he is part of a problem. He just is the problem, manifested in a blazer and a voice that makes everything sound like something important is always happening. Springfield deserves its Kent Brockman. Every town deserves its Kent Brockman. The news we get is usually the news we have assembled the machinery to receive. And then there is Troy McClure. Phil Hartman's voice, and the character he created, represents one of the great losses in the show's history. Troy McClure was an actor who appeared in an endless series of instructional videos, educational films, commemorative specials, and direct-to-video productions, all of which were referenced in the specific verbal formula. You may remember me from such films as, followed by two titles that were both perfectly observed parodies of a real genre: Phony Virus Alarmers Anonymous, Earwigs, You, Firecrackers, The Silent Killer, Locker Room Towel Fights, The Blinding of Larry Driscoll. The joke was always the list of titles. The pleasure was in the specific, careful wrongness of each one. And Troy himself, smooth, tanned, permanently in the B-list, always cheerful about his diminishing cultural footprint, was a portrait of a certain kind of Hollywood type, the person who never quite made it to the A-list and has rebuilt their identity entirely around the things they have made it to. Troy takes educational videos seriously. He puts real enthusiasm into narrating safety films. He is, in his way, a professional. When Phil Hartman was killed in 1998, the show retired Troy McClure and several other characters he had voiced as a gesture of respect. The gap they left has never quite been filled. Springfield is slightly smaller without them, but they are still there, in the old episodes, still cheerful, still reading from teleprompters and narrating instructional films, and appearing in commemorative specials. Still part of the inner television landscape that the show built around itself. The recordings remain, playing in the perpetual present of the show, where the episode has not ended yet and everyone is still alive. Let the images drift. The television inside the television. The shows within the show. The screens that glow inside the screen you are watching, all the way down. There is something comforting about this nested quality. Television inside television, stories inside stories, the frame within the frame. It makes the whole thing feel more stable somehow, more layered, more durable. As if the show has been building something over decades that holds together not despite its contradictions, but because of them. The inner shows make the outer show more real. The fake news makes the fake town feel more inhabited. The itchy and scratchy theme music, playing inside Homer's living room and bouncing out into your living room, is a little echo of itself that never quite stops. It is a good sound to fall asleep to. Section 6. The moments that were genuinely too dark. The Simpsons is a comedy. This statement is true, and it is also somewhat misleading. The show has always operated in the space between comedy and something harder to name. Its best episodes are funny in the way that life is sometimes funny unexpectedly, reluctantly, in the middle of things that are also painful. The laughter it generates at its peak is not the clean, stress-free laughter of a show that has decided nothing is really at stake. It is the laughter that comes when something true has been said in a way that catches you off guard. But there are moments in the show's history that go beyond that, moments that are not quite redeemed by the jokes around them. Moments where something dark was allowed to sit in the frame for longer than is comfortable, where the show seemed to be looking at something it usually looked away from and deciding, this time, not to look away. These are the moments that stay with people. Not always as favorite moments, sometimes just as moments that refuse to leave. Let your breathing slow here. This section has some weight to it, but we are carrying it gently. The night is soft and the dark is safe. One of the most unexpected of these moments comes in Bart the General, one of the earliest episodes, season 1, when the show was still finding its footing. Bart is being bullied by Nelson Muntz, and the episode is a fairly standard underdog story. The bullied kid rallies his allies, confronts the bully, and achieves a kind of peace. The ending is played for laughs, but buried in the middle of the episode, there is a scene where Bart is lying in bed after another day of being beaten up, and he is crying. Not cartoon crying, not the exaggerated performance of sadness that animated characters usually do. He is just lying there, quiet, and his face is doing something small and real, and there is no music over it, and it lasts about 4 seconds. 4 seconds, but they land. Because in those 4 seconds, the show is acknowledging something it usually keeps at a comfortable distance. That childhood is sometimes genuinely hard, that the powerlessness of being small in a world organized by people bigger than you can be a real source of pain, and that Bart, who is usually defined by his defiance and his resilience, is in private a child who sometimes runs out of resilience. The moment passes. The episode moves on. The gags resume. But that 4-second silence lodged itself in the consciousness of a generation of children who recognized it. Then there is One Fish, Two Fish, Blowfish, Bluefish from season 2. The episode in which Homer eats fugu at a sushi restaurant, is told he has ingested a lethal dose of pufferfish toxin, and is given 24 hours to live. The episode is ostensibly a comedy of errors. Homer's attempts to spend his last day meaningfully go wrong in various ways, but underneath it, there is a structural seriousness that the show does not usually risk. Homer makes a list of things he wants to do before he dies. He wants to eat a large meal. Hear his father say he is proud of him. Make love to Marge. Tell his children he loves them. Be kind to his neighbor. See the sunrise. The list is simple. It is not ambitious or world-changing. It is just the things that would matter, actually matter, to a man who was trying to spend his last hours well. Some of these things happen. Some do not, or do not happen the way Homer wanted them to. His father is emotionally unavailable in the way that Homer's father has always been emotionally unavailable, and the conversation they have is both funny and quietly devastating. Homer falls asleep before the sunrise, and then he wakes up. He did not die after all. The toxin was not fatal. And the episode ends not with celebration, but with Homer sitting in front of the television, watching bowling on television, eating pork rinds, apparently having forgotten everything the previous 24 hours taught him. It is the bleakest possible ending. It is also one of the most honest things the show ever said. The near-death experience does not change us. The clarity we feel at the edge of things dissipates the moment we step back from it. We go back to the couch. We go back to the pork rinds. We meant to do better, and we will, next time, maybe. The sunrise Homer missed keeps coming up in discussions of that episode. It is such a small thing, just a sunrise. Something that happens every day. Something he could watch tomorrow if he got up a little earlier. But he was too tired. He had used up his energy on the list, on the attempts at connection, on the trying to make things matter. And so he missed the sunrise, and then he did not die. And the whole thing just settled back into ordinary life. There is a gentleness in how you experience this image late at night. The morning is coming. It always does. You do not have to be awake for it. Marge Be Not Proud is an episode that handles its dark material in a different way. Not through death or existential crisis, but through the specific shame of childhood. Bart steals a video game. He is caught on the store's surveillance camera. He is humiliated. And then worse, Marge finds out. And for a period in the episode, there is a distance between them that the show renders with an unusual emotional precision. Marge does not yell at him. She does not punish him dramatically. She simply seems hurt. She treats him with a politeness that is worse than anger because it is the politeness of someone who is protecting themselves from more hurt. Bart, who is defined by his relationship with his mother, who genuinely loves her in the careless way that children love the person they have always been able to count on, understands that he has damaged something, and he does not know how to fix it. The episode is about his attempt to fix it. He gets a professional photo taken as a gift because it is the kind of thing Marge would want: a formal portrait of him, looking presentable, being the kind of son she might be proud of. The ending is warm. The photograph is accepted. The distance closes. But the episode does not pretend the hurt did not happen. It just shows you what repairs look like: effortful, slightly awkward, motivated by love even when they are not fully graceful. Homer's relationship with his father, Abe Simpson, is a thread of genuine darkness that runs through the entire show without ever quite being resolved. Abe is funny. He is a source of comic relief, of rambling stories that go nowhere, of outdated opinions and period-specific confusions. But the show is also clear about something. Abe is a man who failed as a father. The relationship between him and Homer is damaged in ways that Homer does not quite have the language to fully understand. Homer wanted a father who was present and affirming, and Abe, for whatever combination of reasons, could not be that. The episode Homer's Barbershop Quartet includes a scene where a young Homer, expecting to be praised for something he is proud of, does not get the praise. The scene is brief. Abe just does not quite manage it. The warmth is there somewhere, you can feel it, but he cannot get it out of his throat. And Homer's face goes still for a moment in that small, real way that faces sometimes go still when they have been let down quietly. The show does not dwell on this. It never does. There is a joke, and then another scene, and then something else. But the not dwelling is itself a kind of honesty, because that is how these things work. You do not dwell. You move on. You carry it without carrying it. Mother Simpson is perhaps the episode where the show most clearly allows a moment of genuine grief without offering redemption. Homer's mother, whom he believed was dead his entire adult life, turns out to have been alive, and there is a reunion, and it is warm and healing and full of the specific relief of being known by someone who knew you before you were who you are. And then she has to leave. She cannot stay, because she is a fugitive, and the man who pursued her is still powerful, and she goes. And Homer is left standing on a hillside at night, looking up at the stars, while the credits roll in silence. No joke. No coda. No cut to Homer back on the couch having processed his feelings. Just Homer standing there in the dark, with a loss he did not know he had, and then briefly did not have, and now has again, and the stars. It is one of the most beautiful and most painful moments in the show's history. It has been discussed in film schools. It has been cited as evidence that the show, at its best, achieved something more than entertainment, which it did, which it still does, in the episodes where it allows the darkness to sit there for a moment without rushing to cover it with a joke. The darkness is sitting here now too, the good darkness, the quiet darkness, the darkness that a night like this is made of. And it is okay. You are resting inside it. The stars are where they are, and Homer is still on that hillside, in the perpetual present of the show, standing and looking up. You can rest alongside him for a while. Section 7: Springfields. Impossible geography and architecture. Springfield should not exist. This is not a criticism. It is a simple spatial observation. The town of Springfield, as depicted across 30-plus years of The Simpsons, occupies a geographical location that cannot be consistently determined, contains a number of buildings and distances that contradict each other depending on the episode, and has a physical size that fluctuates between small Midwestern town and mid-sized American city based entirely on narrative convenience. The show's creators have always been direct about this. When asked where Springfield is, they say, everywhere. They say, it is an American average. They say, the specific state does not matter because what Springfield represents is universal. All of this is true, and none of it explains how the city simultaneously has a harbor, a desert, a glacier, and a corn silo within what appears to be the same zip code. But Springfield's impossibility is not a flaw. It is a feature. The geography of the show works the way the geography of memory works, not spatially accurate, but emotionally accurate. You always know what Springfield feels like even when you cannot quite locate it. You know the texture of its downtown, the particular quality, almost a smell, of its streets, car exhaust, and donut grease, and that indefinable atmosphere of a town that has been itself for a long time. Let your imagination roam through the town slowly. The streets are empty now. It is late. The sky is the specific dark blue that cartoon skies go at night, not quite black, still luminous somehow. The way cartoon everything tends toward a slight excess of color even in the dark. The Simpson house is on 742 Evergreen Terrace, and this address is one of the few consistent geographical anchors the show maintains. The house itself is a slightly idealized version of a late-century American family home. 2 stories, white with a red roof, a garage that Homer has never actually managed to park a car in, a kitchen with a refrigerator that is always full, a living room with a couch positioned precisely in relation to a television. The dimensions of the house change based on what the scene requires. Sometimes the living room is enormous. Sometimes it barely fits the family. The staircase goes wherever the script needs it to go. The basement has been used as a laboratory, a recording studio, a speakeasy, a nuclear fallout shelter, and a storage unit for various Homerian schemes that did not pan out. The house is essentially infinite on the inside, a TARDIS made of cartoon drywall, and it accommodates whatever the story needs it to accommodate because the story always comes first. The neighborhood around 742 Evergreen Terrace is the most consistently rendered part of the show's geography. Ned Flanders' house next door, mirror image of the Simpsons house but slightly better maintained, is always where you expect it. The school, the church, Moe's Tavern, the nuclear plant, these are the poles of the town's magnetic field, the places the characters return to when the episode needs a familiar setting. What is interesting is how much the unfamiliar settings expand the town beyond these poles. Springfield has a monorail that was built, used once, and then apparently abandoned somewhere on the outskirts of the city's consciousness. The monorail episode Marge vs. The Monorail from Season 4 is frequently cited as the greatest episode of the series, and it is easy to understand why. It is a perfectly constructed comedy, a parody of civic boosterism and the susceptibility of small towns to charismatic salespeople. A man named Lyle Landley arrives in Springfield with a shiny proposal and a musical number, and the town votes to spend its windfall on a monorail that does not work. The episode is both funny and accurate. Towns have made worse decisions for similar reasons. The monorail has appeared occasionally in subsequent episodes, its fate unclear, apparently still sitting in the Springfield landscape like a monument to the danger of enthusiasm without skepticism. There is something quietly poignant about it, this expensive, useless structure that the town agreed to and then declined to acknowledge. Springfield also has a mountain where bears occasionally live. It has a harbor with actual ships. It has a ski resort. It has a beach. It has at various points a space agency, a film studio, and a military base that appears and disappears, depending on whether any given episode requires one. It borders the states of Ohio, Nevada, Maine, and Kentucky at different points in the show's history. It has mountains and coastline and desert and farmland and ancient forest all within driving distance of each other. The nuclear plant, the Springfield Nuclear Power Plant, owned and operated by Montgomery Burns, source of employment for Homer, is both a specific physical building and a kind of ambient presence throughout the show. It is always slightly visible, its cooling towers present in wide shots of the Springfield skyline. It is the source of a low-level anxiety that the show maintains in the background without ever quite foregrounding. The knowledge that this town is powered by something radioactive, managed by someone who does not care about its safety, and that the fish in the river occasionally have extra eyes. The three-eyed fish that appears in certain episodes, a byproduct of nuclear runoff, is one of the show's most durable images. It is funny as a visual joke. It is also a fairly direct piece of environmental commentary that the show embeds in its visual world and then does not make a fuss about. The fish is there. The fish has 3 eyes. The plant is up the river. These facts coexist in Springfield the way uncomfortable facts coexist in any community. Acknowledged, not addressed, incorporated into the landscape until they stop feeling remarkable. Moe's Tavern occupies a special position in the town's geography because it occupies a special position in Homer's inner life. It is not just a bar. It is a third place, the space between home and work, where Homer goes to exist without obligation, to sit in the company of other men who also need a third place, to drink beer that costs an amount of money he consistently pretends is less than it is. The tavern is dark and slightly sticky, decorated with items of no particular value in a way that suggests they have been there for a long time without anyone deciding to remove them. The bar itself is long enough to seat about 6 people. There are booths in the back. There is a payphone that has not been used in decades. There is a jar of something on the shelf behind the bar that nobody has ever opened and nobody ever will. Mo Cieslak himself, whose past is hinted at in various contradictory ways throughout the series, is the kind of bartender who functions as a confessor without being equipped to absolve anything. He hears what Homer tells him. He sometimes responds. He is present in the specific, slightly defeated way of someone who chose a vocation for the social contact and then discovered that social contact, in quantity, is its own kind of loneliness. The tavern's regulars Lenny, Carl, Barney Gumble are interesting precisely because the show knows them well enough not to over-explain them. Lenny and Carl are presented as a unit so frequently that the show eventually acknowledged what many viewers had been noticing. Their relationship has qualities that go beyond workplace friendship. Neither the show nor the characters ever named this directly, which is its own kind of commentary on what gets named and what gets left in the peripheral vision of a sitcom. Barney Gumble's history is a whole dark story on its own. He was once, before the show began, a promising student, a person with a future. Something happened. The show suggests it was Homer who first handed him a beer, which is played as a joke and is also genuinely horrible, and now he is the town drunk, defined entirely by his alcoholism, the thing that Springfield recognizes about him before it recognizes anything else. There are episodes that take Barney's potential seriously, that show glimpses of the person he might have been, the person he still sometimes tries to be. He gets sober once, famously, and makes a short film that wins a prize, and then celebrates his sobriety by drinking champagne, which is both a perfectly structured joke and a perfect description of how recovery sometimes goes. The episode treats this not as comedy but as grief, the grief of a small defeat in a long struggle, and then moves on. As the show always moves on. Let the town breathe around you. The streets and their stories. The buildings and their histories. Springfield Elementary is a school that functions as a kind of municipal average, representing everything that is simultaneously wrong and alive about public education. It is underfunded. Its staff is a mixture of the genuinely devoted and the genuinely broken. Principal Skinner runs it with the methods of a military commander, a fact the show frequently attributes to his traumatic experience in Vietnam, which he references often and processes never. He genuinely cares about education in an abstract way. He does not always know how to connect that care to the actual children in front of him. Mrs. Krabappel, Bart's teacher, Edna, to her friends, is one of the great supporting characters in American television. She was a person before the show started, with a history and hopes and a way of moving through the world that the years have shaped. By the time we meet her, those hopes have gone through a specific kind of attrition, not catastrophic loss, but the gradual reduction of what she expects from life, from her career, from the men she dates. She still shows up. She still tries on good days. She is not defeated. She has recalibrated. When the actress Marcia Wallace, who voiced Mrs. Krabappel, died in 2013, the show retired the character. Springfield Elementary carried on, but something changed in the texture of the building. Something quiet and specific, felt mostly in the absence of a particular laugh. The geography of Springfield is the geography of a town that holds its losses quietly. The buildings remain. The streets are the same, the cooling towers are still visible on the horizon, but the people who gave the places their meaning are sometimes gone, and the town, being a cartoon town, goes on in their absence. The town at night is full of these absences. Every place you know is also the memory of something that happened there. The diner where something was said that changed things. The street corner where something almost happened. The window where a light used to be on. Springfield carries all of this the way any town carries it, silently, persistently, in the specific architecture of the places that remain. Close your eyes a little more. The streets are quiet. The cooling towers are just shapes against the sky. The town is breathing slowly. You are in good company here. Section 8. The guest stars who got weird. The Simpsons invented the celebrity cameo as a structural element of television comedy. That is a fairly bold claim, and there were certainly antecedents. Variety shows had been doing celebrity appearances for decades, but what The Simpsons pioneered was something specific. The guest star who appeared not to be charming or to plug their new film, but to participate in the story of the episode as themselves. To play a version of themselves that the show then subjected to the same satirical pressure it applied to everyone and everything else. The early template was set by Season 2's celebrity appearances, which established the rules. The guest star could be famous, but they could not be sacred. They had to be willing to be funny, and to be funny they sometimes had to be self-deprecating or strange, or willing to participate in scenarios that had nothing to do with why they were famous. The best Simpsons guest appearances are the ones where the celebrity seems to understand that they are not being asked to play themselves, they are being asked to play the show's idea of themselves, which is a very different thing. Let us wander through some of the strangest. Michael Jackson's appearance, discussed briefly in the side character section, deserves more time here because it is one of the most peculiar and best disguised celebrity cameos in television history. Jackson, credited as John J. Smith, voiced the character Leon Kompowski, who claims to be Michael Jackson. The joke is that he sounds exactly like Michael Jackson, which creates a sustained ambiguity. The character is not Michael Jackson, but Michael Jackson is voicing him, and the fictional Michael Jackson the character claims to be is somewhere between those two facts. Jackson reportedly loved working on the episode and pushed to be involved. His participation was a secret for some time, partly for business reasons, partly because the joke was funnier if you did not know. When you watch the episode knowing Jackson is in it, you hear the performance differently. There is a warmth in it that seems genuine. The songs he helped create for the episode, including the birthday song for Lisa, are actually good, in a tender, slightly clumsy way that feels intentional rather than negligent. Ringo Starr appeared in Season 4's Brushed with Greatness, in which Marge discovers a talent for painting and, in a storyline of sublime absurdity, is eventually commissioned to paint his portrait. The episode plays with the idea of delayed acknowledgement. Marge had been a Ringo devotee in her youth and had sent him a fan letter that he never answered. At the end of the episode, he is shown answering his mountain of decades-old fan mail, finally getting to Marge's letter. The image of Ringo in his home, still answering letters from the 1960s, is played as a gentle joke, and it is very funny. But it also carries a strange tenderness. Something about the image of a person carefully fulfilling obligations to people who are still waiting, years later, for an acknowledgement that may come long after it would have changed anything. Paul and Linda McCartney appeared in Lisa the Vegetarian, one of the show's most beloved episodes, under the specific condition, negotiated in advance, that Lisa would not revert to eating meat at the end of the episode. The show agreed. The episode ends with Lisa and Paul sharing a moment about vegetarianism, and Paul sharing his apparently very simple recipe for applesauce, which is genuinely just applesauce made in the most direct possible way. The condition and the compliance are both interesting. The McCartneys cared enough about the message to make it a deal-breaker, and the show cared enough about getting them to agree. It is one of the rare cases where a celebrity's values and the show's own satirical instincts found a genuine point of overlap. Tom Jones appeared on the show twice, and was wonderful both times in a way that suggested he either understood the joke perfectly or was incapable of taking himself too seriously, which amounts to the same thing. His second appearance involved him parachuting into a stadium as part of something that escalated far beyond what any reasonable person would have planned, and his commitment throughout was exemplary. Johnny Cash voiced a coyote, specifically Homer's spirit guide, in a southwestern peyote vision sequence, which is as strange as it sounds and stranger in practice. The episode involves Homer eating a batch of extremely hot peppers on a dare and experiencing an extended hallucinogenic vision during which he encounters a coyote voiced by Johnny Cash, who helps him find his soulmate and navigate the specific spiritual crisis of being Homer Simpson. Cash's voice, low and deliberate and entirely itself, is put in service of a completely surreal situation, and the contrast between the gravity of his delivery and the absurdity of the scenario creates something that is funny and oddly beautiful at the same time. The coyote, with Johnny Cash's voice, padding through Homer's spirit landscape under a vast southwestern sky, is one of the show's great images. It belongs on a list with the comet and the hillside and the sunrise Homer missed. Leonard Nimoy appeared twice and treated both appearances with the patient dignity of a man who has made peace with being a cultural touchstone. In one appearance, he functioned as a kind of Greek chorus figure present at the edge of the narrative, commenting on it, occasionally nudging it toward resolution. The specific quality he brought was a bemused gravity, as if he had been observing human behavior from slightly outside it for so long that it had become both deeply familiar and permanently strange to him. Stephen Hawking appeared several times on the show, and each time the show treated him with a peculiar combination of reverence and absurdity that was entirely specific to The Simpsons and entirely earned. He was presented as the genius in the show's cosmology, and also as someone capable of physical comedy that the show found excuses to stage around him. In one appearance, his wheelchair revealed rocket boosters. In another, he arrived at a critical moment and said something both profound and precisely funny. The Hawking appearances worked because Hawking participated in the joke. He was not being made fun of the show, was inviting him into a kind of comedy that required him to be both exactly what he was and simultaneously something more absurd. He took the invitation. He seemed, in his appearances, to be having a genuinely good time. When Hawking died in 2018, the show paid tribute to him briefly and quietly. Springfield lost one of its strangest regular visitors. The celebrity appearances that work the least are the ones where the famous person seems to be mainly doing a favor for someone, where the cameo exists primarily as a transaction rather than a creative choice. These are the appearances where you can feel the absence of genuine participation. The voice is there, saying the lines, but the person is not quite in the room. The best appearances have the opposite quality. You feel the presence of someone choosing to be there, choosing to commit to the bit, choosing to be part of something rather than just lending their name to it. The most interesting guest appearances are the ones that feel like collaborations, where the show gave the guest something genuine to do, a character problem to solve, an emotion to play, a joke that required their specific qualities to land, and the guest rose to meet it. Those moments suggest what is possible when the machinery of celebrity is put aside and two creative parties just try to make something good together. Springfield has hosted hundreds of them. Some are gone now, the voice is retired. The people who made them no longer here. But the recordings remain, playing in the perpetual present of the show, where everyone is always still alive and the episode has not ended yet, and the coyote is still walking through the desert with Johnny Cash's voice, telling Homer something important about finding his way home. Section 9. Bart's strangest schemes and their aftermath. Bart Simpson is, at his core, a person who cannot leave well enough alone. This is not a criticism, it is a description. The quality that defines him, that has defined him since the show's first episode, is a restlessness that is not quite ambition, a creativity that is not quite intelligence, a risk tolerance that is not quite courage. He does things because he wants to see what will happen. He causes trouble because trouble is more interesting than its absence. He schemes not necessarily to achieve any specific outcome, but because the process of scheming, the planning, the preparation, the execution, the improvisation when the plan falls apart, is itself satisfying, in a way that being good never quite manages to be. This quality has produced, across 30-plus years, an enormous variety of schemes, pranks, plans, projects, campaigns, scams, and acts of pure creative disruption. Some of them are famous, some are forgotten, some were executed with a precision that would have impressed professionals in the relevant field. Some fell apart before the first step and produced a different kind of chaos anyway. All of them tell you something about who Bart is. Let us spend some time with the ones that were strangest. Bart Gets Famous from Season 5 involves Bart becoming a one-hit pop culture phenomenon on the strength of a single accidental catchphrase. He is working as Krusty's assistant on the set of The Krusty Show, and during a live broadcast, he knocks over a set piece. The subsequent chaos is broadcast nationwide, and his shouted, "I didn't do it," becomes the thing. The next week, America loves Bart for a reason that has nothing to do with anything he intended or planned or is particularly proud of. The episode is a satire of fame, of the randomness of celebrity, of the way cultural attention attaches itself to people and then moves on. But it is also a specific meditation on Bart's relationship with his own identity. He becomes famous for something that is essentially an accident. He is hired to do morning show appearances. He says, "I didn't do it," in increasingly forced context for audiences who are already starting to tire of it. The phrase stops being funny. The audience moves on. Bart goes back to being Bart. The ending of the episode is one of the show's gentlest. Bart is in his room, having been chewed up and spat out by the fame machine, and he is just lying there, and Marge comes in and asks if he is okay. And he says something like, "It is weird, but I think I would rather just be myself." And Marge says something warm and true, and it is a sentimental ending, and the show knows it is sentimental, and it plays a slight ironic grace note over it. But it does not undercut the sentiment too hard because the sentiment is earned. Because Bart actually did learn something. The episode is not just a gag machine. It tracked a real arc. Bart sells his soul is one of the most ambitious episodes in the show's history, partly because it takes its central premise completely seriously. Bart, convinced that souls do not exist, sells his to Milhouse for $5. And then strange things start happening. Automatic doors do not open for him. His reflection takes a moment to catch up. Animals do not respond to him the way they did before. He cannot laugh at things that used to be funny. The episode treats this as real, not as delusion, not as placebo effect, not as the show winking about the conceit. Bart sold his soul and now something is genuinely different, and the show follows that thread to its conclusion. Bart needs his soul back, and he gets it, in an ending that is both unexpected and completely right. What is interesting is the specific symptoms the show chose. Not pain, not illness, not disaster. The things that Bart loses without his soul are the things that connect you to your environment, the small, unconscious reciprocities of being a living thing in a world full of other living things. Animals who do not respond, doors that do not open, a reflection that takes a moment to catch up, as if it is not quite sure you are still there. These are not dramatic losses. They are existential ones. The episode ends with Lisa having quietly bought back Bart's soul and returning it to him, and she says something about how the soul is the piece of yourself that you can lose without knowing you have lost it, the thing that connects you to everything, that makes you feel at home in your own skin. And then they go to sleep, and the night is quiet, and the soul is back where it belongs. Close your eyes a little more. You are whole. The night is gentle around you. Bart versus Australia is a scheme that began, innocuously, as a scientific experiment. Bart wanted to know if water in the southern hemisphere really does spin the other direction when it drains, which it does not. As it happens, this being a myth, the Coriolis effect being far too subtle to affect something as small as a draining bathtub, and his quest to test this hypothesis led him, through a series of escalating misunderstandings involving phone calls to the southern hemisphere at the family's expense, to becoming the subject of a minor international incident involving the United States government and the nation of Australia. The episode is broad political comedy, a satire of American diplomatic awkwardness in foreign countries, and it is very funny. But it begins with Bart sitting at home, genuinely curious about something. That curiosity, unguided and undisciplined, produced chaos, but it was genuine curiosity. He wanted to know something, and he went and tried to find out. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, one of the most important things a person can do. The schemes involving Bart and Homer working together, and these happen more often than you might remember, are among the show's most comfortable and most surprising. When Bart and Homer are on the same side of something, when they have found a project they are both invested in, there is a warmth between them that neither character is quite equipped to express directly. They express it through the shared project. They express it through the scheme. There is an episode where they enter a canoe race together, and the preparation for the race is funny, and the race itself is funny. And there is a moment in the middle of it where they are just in a boat together, father and son paddling in the same direction, not talking about anything important, and the moment has a quality that the show does not try to name or explain. It is just there. It is one of those small, specific things that the show accumulated over decades that you cannot quite describe to someone who has not seen it, but that you carry with you anyway. Bart's relationship with his own intelligence is one of the show's long-running ambiguities. He is repeatedly identified as a student who could do better if he applied himself, a kid whose scores improve dramatically when he actually tries, who can demonstrate a sudden precision when the stakes feel right. And yet the show is careful never to make too much of this. Bart is not secretly brilliant. He is smart in particular ways, in practical ways, in the specific way of someone who pays very close attention to how things actually work in the world. He understands systems. He is good at reading people. He knows, usually, exactly which button to push and precisely when to push it. But he does not do anything ambitious with this intelligence. He stays Bart. He keeps scheming small schemes and getting into small trouble, and occasionally, around the edges of the chaos, doing something that turns out to be genuinely kind. The kindness, when it comes, is never announced. Bart does not have the emotional vocabulary to say, "I did this because I care about you." He does it and then looks somewhere else and waits for the topic to change. He is, at his core, someone who loves his family and his friends and his town in a way he would rather demonstrate than articulate, and who finds the articulation embarrassing in a way that the demonstration never is, which might be the most human thing about him. There are also the pranks that backfired in directions nobody anticipated. The time Bart sent a letter to a child in another country that spiraled into an international friendship that the show treated with unexpected warmth. The time a scheme to get out of school led to Bart accidentally discovering something about himself that the school would never have helped him find. The time he pulled a prank on the whole town and the town, rather than getting angry, found it funny, and the shared laughter created a moment of community that nothing intentional could have manufactured. Springfield is, in many ways, the town that Bart built. His fingerprints are on its mythology. The pranks he pulled, the things he said on the school intercom, the events he set in motion, they are woven into the texture of the place in ways that will outlast any individual episode. He is not a hero. He is not meant to be, but he is unmistakably a presence. The town would be quieter without him. It would also be safer. The choice the town makes, episode after episode, is that it would rather have the noise. Let that settle. The quiet schemes, the loud ones, the ones that worked, and the ones that produced something better than what they were going for. All of them, Bart. All of them, Springfield. Section 10. The quiet weirdness of Marge. Marge Simpson is underrated. Not by the people who love her. Those people know exactly what she is. But she is underrated by the culture's general sense of the show, which tends to center Homer's chaos and Bart's rebellion and Lisa's passion, and treats Marge as the stable element in the equation. The one who holds things together. The normal one? She is not the normal one. She is the most interesting one. And the show has always known this, even when it has not had time to explore it. Consider what Marge is actually doing in any given episode. She is managing a household of 3 children and a husband who regularly, through negligence or enthusiasm or sheer cosmic misfortune, causes minor disasters. She is doing this with a patience that is both genuine and occasionally strained past its capacity. She has opinions, strong ones, about art and decency and the way people should treat each other, and she expresses those opinions through a combination of gentle persistence and sudden, surprising firmness. She has a past, a complex one, occasionally glimpsed that has left her with a specific set of values and a specific set of wounds. And she is doing all of this while being a cartoon character whose defining visual feature is a tower of blue hair that extends several feet above her head, which the show has never once explained. The hair is worth pausing on. It is one of the most distinctive visual designs in television history, and it has become so normalized that viewers rarely question it. But if you stop and actually look at it, if you let yourself really see it, the hair is deeply strange. It defies gravity. It defies hair physics. It requires significant maintenance that is never depicted. It is the color of no naturally occurring hair color. It has been this way for the entire show's run, since before the show's run, since the early life of the character. The show has occasionally acknowledged the hair's strangeness. There is a Treehouse of Horror segment where something lives in it and a few passing jokes about its maintenance requirements, but mostly it just exists, a piece of visual architecture as fundamental as the yellow skin and the 4 fingers. Marge is the woman with the blue hair, the same way Homer is the man with the belly and the 5 o'clock shadow. But what is in the hair, figuratively? What is Marge hiding in plain sight at maximum height? Let your breathing slow. We are going somewhere softer now. Marge's relationship with art is one of the show's most consistent threads. She was a good painter. As a young woman, we see this in flashbacks, and the impulse never quite left her. She takes it up again in episodes devoted to the subject, and the episodes are always partly about the tension between self-expression and the responsibilities of a person who is primarily defined, in her community's eyes, by her relationships to others. She is Homer's wife, she is Bart's mother, she is Lisa's mother, she is Maggie's mother, she is the woman at the center of a family. The woman who paints is a version of herself that exists outside all of those definitions, and accessing it requires something time, privacy, permission she has to give herself because nobody is going to give it to her. The episode Brush with Greatness, the one with Ringo Starr, is built around the discovery that Marge used to paint portraits of Ringo in a teenage obsession that she kept hidden until Homer rediscovered the canvases in the attic. The portraits are surprisingly good. They show a technical skill that nobody in the family knew she had. And the episode is, on one level, about that kind of secret competence about the things people hide in themselves, sometimes out of modesty and sometimes out of uncertainty about whether the world has a place for them. Marge's painting is given a kind of validation. By the end of the episode, she paints Mr. Burns in a portrait that is honest about who he is rather than flattering, and the honesty is recognized and respected by the subject himself, which is one of the show's better jokes about the nature of portraiture. But the more interesting moment is earlier, when she first shows Homer the portraits and he has to sit with the fact that his wife has a whole domain of skill and passion that he has never known about. Homer is good at many things, but emotional fine-tuning is not always among them. He absorbs this information with something between awe and guilt and makes an effort, which is usually his best move. Marge's relationship with propriety, with the rules of social behavior, and the maintenance of decency is another area where she becomes more interesting the more closely you look. She has a strong moral code, stronger than any other character in the show's central cast. But it is not a rigid or unkind code. It bends, it accommodates, it distinguishes between the spirit of a rule and its letter in ways that more doctrinaire moralists never manage. She campaigned to clean up cartoon violence once, in a Season 3 episode where she launched a successful effort to sanitize the Itchy and Scratchy program. The episode treats her position with both sympathy and gentle irony. She succeeds, the show is cleaned up, and then when Michelangelo's David comes to Springfield as part of an art exhibition, she finds herself unable to object to the nudity because the nudity is art, and she knows the difference between art and exploitation. The episode ends with her retracting her position on Itchy and Scratchy, acknowledging that she cannot control everything, and the show thanks her for having been consistent about what she actually believes rather than what she thought she believed. It is a graceful resolution, and it reveals something real about Marge. She is capable of changing her mind when she realizes she was wrong. She does not dig in. She updates. This is rarer than it sounds. Marge's interior life, her private thoughts, her fears, her loneliness, is the subject of relatively few episodes, which makes those episodes particularly resonant. Fear of flying is one of the best. It begins as a Homer plot but turns into an exploration of Marge's phobia of flying, which turns out to be connected to a childhood trauma that she has never processed. The episode ends with her beginning therapy, which is treated as a beginning, not an ending. The problem is not solved. The work is just starting. That willingness to leave things unresolved to end an episode at the start of a process rather than its conclusion is one of the show's more sophisticated moves, and it is most effective when applied to Marge because her problems are the kind that do not resolve cleanly. They are managed, they are lived with. They are the kind of thing you work on for years without ever being entirely done, and the show has the honesty to say so. The specific loneliness of Marge's position of being the emotional center of a family that frequently does not understand what she does for them, of maintaining warmth in a system that takes it for granted, is something the show allows her to feel without always fixing. There are episodes where she reaches the end of her patience, where she lets the household run without her management to demonstrate what the management actually accomplishes, where she sits in a quiet room and just breathes because the alternative is no longer an option. These moments are played, usually, as comedy. The chaos that ensues when Marge is not there to prevent it is always funny, but the specific quality of her exhaustion is not played for laughs. It is played straight, as a thing that is true, as something the show wants the viewer to see and recognize. She is exhausted. She loves the people who exhaust her. She keeps going. This is what care looks like in practice, and it is complicated. And the show, to its credit, usually does not pretend otherwise. The deep strangeness of Marge, the quality that makes her the most interesting character in the show, in the end is this: she could leave. She could always leave. She is competent, resourceful, skilled, principled, and capable of enormous independent effort. There is no version of the show in which Marge could not have had a different life if she had made different choices. She chose this. She keeps choosing it. Every episode, every season. Homer is who he is, Bart is who he is, Lisa is who she is, Maggie barely speaks. Marge knows exactly what she has and exactly what she does not have, and she has decided again and again that this specific, particular, imperfect arrangement is worth having. That is not a small thing. It is one of the largest things a person can do. Let the image settle. Marge, late at night, after everyone else has gone to bed, in the kitchen, in the light, quiet, having made her peace with things for today, knowing tomorrow will bring more to make peace with. Standing there in the specific stillness of a person who has given a lot and is resting before giving more, there is something very beautiful in that image. Something worth staying with, in the soft dark, before sleep. Section 11. The Animals of Springfield. Springfield has an unusual relationship with the animal kingdom. The town is home to a number of pets, strays, exotic creatures, and inexplicable fauna that have played significant roles in the show's narrative history. The animals of Springfield are not quite like normal television animals. They are, in their way, characters with histories, personalities, and occasional moments of grace that make them more than props or comic devices. Santa's Little Helper came to the family in the first episode of the show's run in December 1989. Homer had lost the family's Christmas money on a greyhound race, specifically on a dog named Santa's Little Helper, who finished last. And in the chaos of the track as the evening fell apart, Homer saw the dog being abandoned by its owner for having failed, and he brought the dog home, and that was that. The origin story is important because it establishes the dog's identity within the family. He is, like most members of the Simpson family, a failure who was taken in. He finished last. He was unwanted. He became, anyway, loved. Santa's Little Helper is not a simple or compliant dog. He chews things. He escapes the yard regularly. He has been involved over the years in a number of subplots that escalated far beyond what a household pet would typically generate. He was briefly a drug-sniffing dog, a racing dog again, a show dog, a father to a litter of puppies that temporarily took over the household, and at various points the subject of custody disputes and legal proceedings that occupied the family for longer than seemed proportionate to the situation. He barks at Patty and Selma with a persistence that suggests he knows something about them that the rest of the family politely ignores. But the dog is also periodically a source of genuine warmth. There are episodes that are really about him, about his relationship with Bart specifically, which is the emotional core of his presence in the show. Bart and Santa's Little Helper have a friendship that the show depicts with a quiet accuracy, the way a boy and his dog understand each other in wordless, lateral ways. Through proximity and habit rather than explicit communication, Bart talks to the dog. The dog does not understand what is being said, but understands that the talking is important to Bart and responds accordingly. There is an episode Bart's dog gets an F where Santa's Little Helper's failure to be trained becomes a crisis. The dog is failing obedience school. The family is considering getting rid of him, and Bart, who has always identified with the dog in a specific way, who sees in the dog's chaos and resistance a kind of mirror of his own, refuses to accept this. He trains him with effort and patience and the specific application of care to something that matters. The episode ends with the dog passing, and it is a small victory played as a big one because the stakes were real. The family stayed together. Sometimes that is the whole story. Let that settle. The small victories. The ones that keep families intact. Snowball the cat is the other major Simpson pet, and she is, in a sense, several cats. The original Snowball, white, beloved, run over by a car before the series began, is gone before we meet the family. The Snowball we know is Snowball 2, a black cat, who represents replacement and continuation, and the way that families absorb loss by adding new things that carry the weight of the old things' names. There have been additional Snowballs. After the second Snowball is also run over in a later episode, the family cycles through Snowballs 3, 4, and 5 in relatively quick succession before Lisa decides that the fifth cat, who happens to be identical to the second Snowball in every observable way, shall simply be called Snowball 2, because continuity requires some things to stay the same even when they have changed. The cat's name shall not change, and the cat shall be whoever they need to be to hold that name. This is a very Simpsons resolution to a very Simpsons problem. It is also, without making a fuss about it, a small piece of philosophy about identity and naming, and the way we use names to maintain a kind of continuity with things we have lost. The cat is not the same cat. The name is the same name. And in Springfield, that is enough. The three-eyed fish Blinky is an animal who serves as a piece of environmental commentary that the show embeds in its visual world and then lets sit there, unresolved, across decades. Blinky appears occasionally, pulled from the river near the nuclear plant, regarded with either alarm or acceptance depending on which episode is running. The fish has three eyes because the nuclear plant has been releasing radioactive material into the river for decades. This is not subtle. The show does not try to make it subtle. And yet Springfield continues to operate the plant, continues to fish in the river, continues to eat what comes out of it. Blinky is Springfield's conscience made visible, and then ignored. The fish has three eyes, and nobody is going to do anything about it, and that is fine. That is just how it is around here. The elephant is another animal that serves a particular function in the show's mythology. Bart wins an elephant in a radio contest. The station expected him to take the cash equivalent because the elephant was not meant to be the real prize. It was meant to be the funny, impossible option that nobody would actually choose. And Bart, being Bart, chooses the elephant. The elephant is named Stampy. Stampy is destructive and joyful in equal measure. He breaks things and eats things and moves through the world with the cheerful indifference of an animal that has no concept of property damage and no particular interest in acquiring one. He is, in a sense, the platonic form of Bart, pure energy and appetite, without the complicating factor of consequences or the social awareness that occasionally makes Bart pull back from the edge. The episode ends with Stampy being donated to an animal reserve, which is the right ending, the responsible ending, the ending that Marge would insist upon and that everyone, on reflection, has to agree makes sense. But there is a moment before the ending where Bart and the elephant are just together, the boy and the enormous animal, regarding each other across the gap of species, and it has a quality of genuine connection. The elephant does not understand Bart's problems. Bart does not understand the elephant's inner world, if elephants have inner worlds in the way we imagine they might. But they like each other. They are, briefly, good company for each other. And the loss of that company, which is the loss the episode is really about, is real, even if it is the right loss. Pinchy the lobster is perhaps the most purely tragicomic animal in the show's history. Homer buys Pinchy as a pet with the eventual intention of eating him, a practical decision that becomes emotionally complicated as soon as Pinchy is brought home, because Homer is Homer, and he forms attachments to things that are supposed to be temporary. He walks Pinchy. He talks to Pinchy. He bathes Pinchy in warm water, and then he accidentally boils Pinchy while giving him a warm bath because the water was too warm, and Pinchy dies. And then Homer eats Pinchy while crying. The episode treats this with exactly the right amount of seriousness, which is to say, it treats it with genuine seriousness while being completely aware of its own absurdity and lets both of those things be true simultaneously. Homer is actually grieving. The thing he is grieving is also funny. These two facts do not cancel each other out. They coexist in the specific way that a lot of things coexist in The Simpsons, which is to say, without resolution, just in proximity, bumping against each other in the dark. The bears that occasionally wander into Springfield from the mountains deserve a moment. They are always treated with a mixture of terror and bureaucratic overreaction, which is approximately how suburban communities do treat bears in real life. The episode that involves a bear encounter becoming a political incident leading to the creation of the Bear Patrol, and then Homer objecting to the tax that funds the Bear Patrol, setting off a chain of logic that becomes a meditation on the relationship between public goods and private objection, is one of the show's most precisely constructed pieces of political satire. The bear is the cause of everything, and the bear does not know this. And the bear does not care, because the bear is just a bear, doing what bears do, moving through a world that has inconveniently built a town in its territory. Santa's little helper sleeps at the foot of Bart's bed most nights. He does not know what day it is or what year it is, or that the show has been running for over 30 years. He knows that the bed is warm and that Bart is in it, and that his job, right now, is to be present. He is very good at his job. Late at night, there is something very stabilizing about the presence of an animal. The specific warmth of something alive, something that does not think in words or worry about the past or make plans for the future, something that exists entirely in the present moment, untroubled by anything that has not already happened or cannot be smelled or heard or touched. If you have an animal near you tonight, if there is a dog or a cat or some other creature sharing your space, you might feel this quality. The animal is just here. The animal is just breathing. And for the duration of that breathing, being here alongside it is enough. The Springfield animals live in the present tense. They always have. They are, in this way, the wisest characters in the show. Section 12 Springfield in every season. There is a joke in the show that runs for several hundred episodes without anyone ever making it explicit. Springfield does not have consistent seasons. It has weather. It has plenty of weather blizzards and heat waves and thunderstorms and the occasional tornado, but the weather does not correspond to any consistent climatic reality. Springfield has been buried under several feet of snow in March and has also, in a different episode, been sweltering through a summer heat wave in what appears to be the same fictional month. It has experienced hurricane-force winds. It has had droughts severe enough to crack the ground. It has had rain that lasted for weeks. None of this is connected to any single climate. Springfield's weather is the weather it needs for each episode, pulled from whatever the story requires, matched to the emotional register the writers are going for. A dark episode needs rain. A nostalgia episode needs golden autumn light. An episode about community and togetherness needs snow. The weather is a mood system, not a meteorological one. This is, on one level, just how it is with location-ambiguous American towns in fiction. The town is everywhere, so it gets all the weather. But on another level, Springfield's seasonal chaos is part of its deeper strangeness, the way the town refuses to be governed by any single logic, the way it accommodates whatever it needs to accommodate, because it exists in a universe that operates by story rules rather than physical ones. The Christmas episode is always snow. This is one of the show's most reliable aesthetic commitments. The first episode of the entire series, Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, is set at Christmas. And the snow in that episode has a particular quality. Slightly blue-gray, slightly heavy, the snow of a Midwest winter that is not romantic but is real. The light is cold. The town is quiet. Homer is at the racetrack, having lost the family's Christmas money, and the year is about to end, and nothing has gone the way it was supposed to. And then he brings home the dog, and the family gathers on the couch, and the snow falls outside the window. And Christmas happens in the specific way that Christmas happens in the Simpsons universe. Not perfectly, not according to any magazine spread ideal, but with the people you love in the same room, which is the actual prerequisite. The seasonal episodes are some of the show's most emotionally consistent. Summer episodes tend toward adventure and freedom. Bart and Homer going somewhere, trying something, doing the thing they never get to do during the school year. Fall episodes tend toward nostalgia and return. The children going back to school, the rhythm of the year reasserting itself, the particular mix of dread and comfort that September has for anyone who spent enough years inside a school building to have it written permanently into their body. Spring episodes tend toward hope and mild disaster. Winter episodes tend toward warmth and its absence. The Thanksgiving episode is an interesting case because Thanksgiving does not have a strong visual identity in the Simpsons universe the way Christmas does. There have been Thanksgiving episodes, and they tend to deal with the specific tensions of family holidays, the enforced proximity, the old conflicts that rise to the surface when you put enough relatives in a room with a large meal and not enough to do. These episodes are not usually beloved the way the Christmas episodes are, but they are honest in their own way. One of the small pleasures of watching the show is noticing how consistently the light changes across the seasons, how the palette of a winter episode differs from the palette of a summer one in ways the animators clearly cared about. The golden afternoon light of a late September episode, the specific blue-gray of a February morning, the saturated greens of a June afternoon. These choices are not accidental. They are part of the show's commitment to evoking feeling through environment, even in a cartoon town that does not technically have a fixed climate. Let the light change in your mind for a moment. Think of Springfield in each season the same streets, the same cooling towers, the same yellow houses, but the light falling differently on each of them. Winter light, cold and direct. Spring light, tentative and new. Summer light, heavy and golden and infinite feeling. Fall light, already carrying the knowledge that it is leaving. The town is the same in each of them. The people are the same, but the light changes, and the light changes everything. Just a little, just enough to make each season feel like a different place, even though the address on every door stays exactly the same. Section 13, the episodes everyone forgot. There are gaps in the Simpsons canon that get very little attention. Not the bad episodes, the internet has cataloged those exhaustively, and there is not much to add to 30 years of debate about when exactly the show declined and whether it declined at all or merely changed. Not the celebrated masterpieces, which have been analyzed from every angle available. There is a middle category of episodes that are simply overlooked, not bad enough to be infamous, not good enough to be famous, just sitting there in the archive, waiting for someone to notice what they were trying to do. Some of these episodes contain extraordinary moments. There is an episode from Season 7 called Home Sweet Home Diddly Dum Doodly that involves Bart, Lisa, and Maggie being temporarily placed with the Flanders family after Child Protective Services visits the Simpson home and finds it, by the standards of the inspection, inadequate. This is played partly as comedy. The inspectors are cartoonishly bureaucratic. The situations that led to the children being deemed at risk are cartoonishly improbable, but the emotional core of the episode is real and relatively dark. The children are removed from their parents. Homer and Marge must demonstrate that they are capable of caring for their family before the children can come home. What the episode does that most commentary overlooks is the specific care it gives to what it feels like to be the Flanders children during this time. Ned and Maude receive Bart, Lisa, and Maggie with complete sincerity. They are not performing kindness, they are being kind in the specific, slightly suffocating Flanders way. And the Simpson children find this disorienting. Not because the Flanders home is bad, it is objectively better maintained and more organized than the Simpson home, but because it is not home. The cleanliness, the orderliness, the persistent cheerfulness, it is all very good and none of it is theirs. And belonging matters more than comfort in the calculation children are always making about where they are safe. The episode ends with Homer and Marge getting the children back, and it is warm. And there is the specific relief of reunion, the children running back, Homer hugging all of them in the ungainly Homer hug, Marge crying in the way Marge cries when something has been restored to her. But the episode earns that warmth by having genuinely put things at stake. It did not hedge. It let the separation feel real. There is also a Season 12 episode called The Computer War Menace Shoes, in which Homer creates an anonymous gossip website called Mr. X that becomes enormously popular, eventually wins an award for journalism, and then in a third act that most viewers remember as strange and maybe not entirely successful, reveals that Homer has been abducted and imprisoned in what is clearly a reference to the British cult television series, Prisoner. The parody is specific and committed and very funny if you know the source material, and genuinely confusing if you do not, which probably contributed to the episode's lack of cultural traction. But the first two acts are surprisingly good. The creation of Mr. X and its rapid ascent to cultural prominence is a fairly sharp piece of commentary about anonymous online gossip and the way that sources matter less than content once the content is circulating. Homer is not a journalist. He has no standards. He makes things up when he runs out of real gossip. And his audience, which has become enormous, does not care, because the content is entertaining, and entertaining content does not require accuracy. This was 2000. The episode was slightly ahead of the media environment it was describing. There is a Season 8 episode called Homer's Phobia, in which Homer befriends a man named John, who turns out to be gay, and then panics about what this means for his son Bart. The episode was controversial at the time of broadcast and has become somewhat more celebrated in retrospect because it handles the material with more care than the time period generally permitted. John, voiced by John Waters, is a fully realized character, funny, warm, and not remotely defined by his sexuality except in the way that the episode's comedy requires. Homer's discomfort is played as a problem to be overcome rather than a valid position. The episode ends with Homer reassessing and, in his way, arriving somewhere better. But the most interesting thing about the episode is the texture of the friendship between Homer and John in the first act, before Homer knows John is gay. They get along well. They enjoy each other's company. There is a genuine rapport. The friendship is real before it becomes complicated. And the episode is partly asking, why should knowing this one thing change the reality of everything that came before it? Homer's answer, in the first act, is that it should not. His answer in the second act is that it does. His answer in the third act is that it should not again. The arc is simple, but the feelings are real. There are also the smaller, quieter episodes that almost nobody talks about because nothing explodes and nobody has an obvious arc, and the whole thing is just sort of about Tuesday. One such episode involves the family visiting a Renaissance fair, which turns into a meditation on escapism and the desire to live in a time period that was worse than the present but at least simpler. Homer enjoys the fair enormously and is sad to leave, and the episode spends a few minutes with that sadness, with the feeling of returning to your regular life from somewhere that felt, briefly, more alive. Or there is an episode largely about Lisa trying to get to the bottom of a class assignment that turns into something more interesting the further she digs into it, and the something more interesting that she finds is small and local and has no grand implications, but it teaches her something about the relationship between official history and actual history that the episode presents without making a speech about. The forgotten episodes are the ones that did one small thing well. They are not landmark television. They are just half hours of care and craft that aired once, were absorbed by the ongoing machine, and settled into the archive. They are worth finding. Let your mind drift through the archive. Hundreds of episodes, most of them watched once and then mostly forgotten by most people, except for the details that caught somewhere and stayed. The jokes you still quote. The images you still see. The small moments that lodge themselves in you without asking permission and have been living there ever since, coming back occasionally when something in your regular life touches the frequency they are on. That is what a long-running show builds, if it is good enough. Not a monument. A frequency. Something that keeps transmitting on its own wavelength, findable whenever you need it. Section 14, The Music of Springfield. The Simpsons has always known what to do with music. Not always in the way that musicals know what to do with music. The big emotional moments, the sung revelations, the chorus lines. The show has done those things, and done them well. But the music we are talking about here is something more ambient. It is the score, the specific, strange, beautiful score that Alf Clausen and his team wrote for the show for nearly 30 years. Clausen's score for The Simpsons is one of the underappreciated masterworks of American television. It is played by a live orchestra, not sampled, not synthesized, but actually played by actual musicians, and it incorporates an enormous range of styles that reflect whatever the scene requires. Classical pastiche for the episodes that have a classical comedy structure, jazz for the late-night scenes, country for the rural episodes, film noir brass for the mystery plots, swing for the 40s flashbacks, something almost avant-garde for the stranger moments, when Springfield's reality starts to drift. The score has a specific quality that is hard to describe but easy to feel. It is always slightly too much. The drama is slightly over-dramatized. The comedy is slightly over-telegraphed. The sadness is scored with just a bit more strings than the moment strictly requires. This is intentional. It is the show doing to its music what it does to everything, pushing slightly past the realistic into the cartoon version of the feeling, the version that is both funnier and more affecting because it is heightened. The Danny Elfman main theme is its own world. It is 8 notes that everybody knows, followed by a piece of writing that is constantly surprising even after you have heard it hundreds of times. The middle section of the theme, the swelling strings, the ascending runs, the moment where the music seems to be about to resolve and then opens up, instead has a quality that is just slightly too large for a sitcom theme. It is music for something epic, used for something domestic, and the gap between those two things is where the humor and the warmth both live. Elfman has said that he wrote the theme in a single night, that it came quickly, that he wrote it to feel both old and modern simultaneously. He succeeded so thoroughly that the theme sounds like it has always existed, like it was there before the show was. It is the kind of piece of music that is hard to imagine the world without. The show has also produced an enormous amount of original songs over the decades, and some of them are genuinely remarkable pieces of writing. The songs from the musical episodes, and there have been many, are written with an attention to structure and melody that commercial musicals occasionally fail to achieve. Monorail, the song from the episode of that name, has a catchy verse and a memorable hook and a built-in satirical function, and it is also, purely as a song, very good. It has been performed by actual choirs. It has been played at actual events. It has escaped the context it was written for and become a thing on its own. There are also the quieter songs, the ones written for individual moments in non-musical episodes. The song Homer writes for Marge as a young man, performed awkwardly but with complete sincerity. The lullaby that plays over a scene of Maggie falling asleep. The specific, tender music that scores the moment in Mona Simpson's episode when the credits roll in silence. The music of The Simpsons is the wallpaper of the dream. It is there constantly, doing its work, creating the emotional architecture of scenes that would be flatter without it. And occasionally, just occasionally, it comes forward and becomes the thing itself, becomes the scene, becomes the emotion, becomes the reason the moment lands. Let the music play in your memory for a moment. You know it better than you know it. It has been in your ears for years, settling into you gradually, becoming part of the frequency of the show. The brass stings that announce a revelation, the strings that accompany a quiet moment between family members, the rising theme that plays when something is about to happen. The music is part of Springfield. It always has been. Section 15. The recurring gags that became mythology. Every long-running show develops recurring gags. The Simpsons, which has been running longer than any other show of its kind, has developed more of them than any other show in history, and some of them have evolved over time from simple jokes into something that resembles mythology. The Sideshow Bob stepping on a rake gag is the most famous of these. The first time it happens in one of the earlier Sideshow Bob episodes, it is a quick visual joke. Bob, walking towards some purpose, steps on a rake. The rake handle flies up and hits him in the face. He makes the specific noise of a man who has just been hit in the face by a rake handle, and the scene continues. The joke is funny, but the show kept returning to it, and each time it returned, it pushed the gag slightly further. The number of rakes increased, the duration increased. In one episode, Bob steps on rake after rake after rake, in sequence for what feels like a very long time, the sound repeating with a rhythm that eventually transcends comedy and becomes something almost hypnotic. The audience laughs at first, and then laughs at the duration, and then laughs at the knowledge that they are laughing at the duration, and then arrives at some fourth state of laughter that is beyond categorization. The rake gag is now one of the most analyzed joke structures in the history of comedy. It has been cited in academic papers about timing and expectation and the point at which repetition transforms a joke into something else. It is a masterpiece of a particular kind, and it started as a 2-second visual gag in a scene about something else entirely. The Simpsons donut gag works differently. Homer's relationship with donuts is not a single joke that gets repeated. It is a character attribute that generates new jokes in each context. Homer reaches for a donut, and the donut is the one the safety inspector was using as a paperweight near the reactor. Homer reaches for a donut, and the donut turns out to be the last evidence preventing a miscarriage of justice. Homer reaches for a donut, and the donut is actually a wheel of something that belongs to a different machine. The donut is never just a donut. It is always also a vehicle for something else, a story element, a character revelation, a joke about Homer's priorities. The donuts are one of the show's clearest expressions of Homer's essential character. The donut is always the most important thing in the room to Homer, regardless of what else is in the room, and this fact, which should be a flaw, and is sometimes treated as a flaw, is also the source of his freedom. Homer is free of the anxiety that comes from caring too much about the right things. His needs are simple. His pleasures are direct. The donut is there. That is enough. The Springfield Gorge is another piece of recurring mythology that started as a single joke and became something more. In Season 2's Bart the Daredevil, Bart plans to skateboard over the gorge, and Homer, trying to prevent him, takes the ramp himself and goes over the gorge instead. He misses the other side and falls. He hits the bottom. Then he is loaded into an ambulance, which takes him back up the hill and rolls off the ramp again, and Homer falls again. The sequence keeps going. It is one of the funniest things in the show's history. But the gorge itself, that specific physical feature of the Springfield landscape, that place where Homer keeps falling, has appeared subsequently in other contexts. Characters reference it. It has been visited. It exists in the collective memory of the town as the place Homer went over, or kept going over, or fell through in increasingly unlikely variations. It is a piece of the Springfield landscape that is defined entirely by one event, and that event keeps getting referenced because the event was funny enough to become part of the town's mythology. The mythology of a place is always built on the same materials, the things that happened there that people could not forget. Springfield's mythology is built on the things that happened to The Simpsons, and The Simpsons' mythology is built on the things that happened to Homer, And the things that happen to Homer tend to involve falling off something or eating something or wanting something too much. These are the materials of comedy. They are also, if you are willing to look at them from a slight angle, the materials of a life. What happened? What you wanted? What you fell off? The mythology accumulates. The episodes pile up. The references compound, pointing back to earlier references, which point back to earlier references still. To watch the show for long enough is to develop a second memory, a memory of Springfield that sits alongside your memory of your own life and occasionally gets confused with it. You remember the gorge. You remember the crayon. You remember the hillside where Homer stood and looked at the stars. These memories are not real. They are memories of a cartoon, but they have the texture of real memories, the emotional weight of real memories, the way they surface unexpectedly when something in the present touches the frequency they are on. That is what the show built. That is what it has been building for over 30 years. A mythology, a memory, a second world that lives inside the first one. Let it live there. Let it go on being there, in the soft dark, where all the best things live. Section 16, Ned Flanders and the Weight of Goodness. Ned Flanders is what happens when you do everything right in a system that does not reward rightness. On the surface, Ned is everything Homer Simpson is not. He is kind, he is generous, he is devoutly religious. He is physically fit, he is financially responsible, he is a good father, he is a good neighbor. He is, by any objective measure, a better person than Homer in nearly every conceivable way, and the show punishes him for it with a relentlessness that stops being funny the moment you look at it directly. Ned's wife, Maude, was killed in a freak accident at the Springfield Speedway. A t-shirt cannon misfired and knocked her off the bleachers. She died because Homer was dodging the t-shirts and they hit Maude instead. Homer's selfishness, in a direct and uncomplicated chain of causation, killed Ned's wife and his children's mother, and Ned forgave him. Because that is what Ned does. He forgives. He turns the other cheek. He absorbs punishment after punishment and responds with grace and patience and an unwavering faith that God has a plan, that suffering has meaning, that the universe in which a man as consistently virtuous as Ned Flanders finds himself repeatedly and disproportionately damaged is still, somehow, a just universe. The cracks in this faith, and they are there, if you look for them, are among the most affecting things in the show's history. When a hurricane destroys Ned's house and the community rebuilds it so poorly that it collapses immediately, Ned snaps. He has a complete psychological breakdown in public. He screams at the entire town. He insults every person who has ever wronged him in terms that are specific and accurate and clearly have been accumulating for a very long time. He says things that have been living in him, held in check by faith and conditioning, and the simple daily effort of being Ned Flanders, and they come out in a rush. And then he is institutionalized. He is committed to a mental health facility where it is revealed that Ned's relentless niceness is not natural. It is the result of childhood behavioral modification. Ned was a violent, uncontrollable child. His parents, beatniks who did not believe in discipline in any form, took him to a psychiatrist who spent years conditioning the aggression out of him. Ned's kindness is not a character trait. It is a psychological cage that was built around a feral child by a professional who decided that the most efficient solution to Ned's chaos was to make Ned incapable of expressing anger. Everything about Ned reads differently once you know this. His patience with Homer is not saintly. It is pathological. He cannot express anger because his brain was wired at an early age to suppress it at all costs, to route it away from expression and towards something that looks, from the outside, like grace. His forgiveness of Homer after Maude's death is not grace. It is the programmed response of a man who was conditioned as a child to never, under any circumstances, allow himself to feel the rage that lives in him, and the show knows this. It has shown us what happens when the conditioning fails. When Ned snaps, the person underneath is not violent. The conditioning held that much, but the despair that emerges is enormous. The despair of a man who has spent his entire adult life performing goodness. Because the alternative, the person he actually is underneath the programming, is someone neither he nor Springfield can afford to release. The darkest thing about Ned Flanders is simpler than any of this, though. It is the following fact: God talks to Homer and does not talk to Ned. In the show's own established continuity, Homer has had direct conversations with God on multiple occasions. God appears to Homer in dreams and visions in the middle of the night. God has advice for Homer. God notices Homer. Ned has prayed his entire life. Ned has built his faith into the structure of his daily existence, the prayers before meals, the church attendance, the specific and sincere effort to order his life according to his beliefs. And God, in the show's established universe, has never once appeared to Ned, never spoken to him, never acknowledged the devotion. Homer, who falls asleep in church, who ignores his faith whenever it is inconvenient, who treats his relationship with the divine roughly the way he treats his relationship with authority at work. Homer gets the conversations. Ned gets the silence. That is not random cruelty. That is the show making a statement about the relationship between virtue and reward, about the way the universe distributes its attention, about what faith costs when it is never reciprocated. Ned has faith. He has earned faith. He performs faith with a consistency and sincerity that should, by any theological logic, matter. And the universe, as the show depicts it, simply does not care. Homer and Ned have lived next door to each other for the entire run of the show. Their children have grown up alongside each other, or not grown up, since nobody in Springfield grows up. Their yards are adjacent. Their lives are, in many ways, parallel. Both are fathers, both are members of the same community, both navigate the same town with the same basic human needs for connection and meaning, and the occasional moment of grace. But the gap between them has never closed. Homer stumbles forward through life and occasionally, accidentally, lands somewhere good. Ned walks forward carefully and precisely and finds, repeatedly, that the ground has given way. They are both still there, on adjacent lots, in the permanent present of the show. Homer is probably watching television. Ned is probably saying his prayers. Let the image sit there for a moment. The two houses, side by side, both lit from within. The gap between them, which is also the gap between effort and ease, between doing everything right and doing everything wrong, between faith and its absence, and neither gap closes, and neither man moves. And the night goes on. Section 17, the flash forwards and what they reveal. The Simpsons cannot commit to its own future. This is not a criticism. It is an observation about what the show has chosen to do with the most powerful tool available to a long-running fiction, the ability to show you what happens next. The show has used flash forwards repeatedly, has shown you Lisa at 23, has shown you Bart as an adult in various configurations, has shown you Springfield in the far future, and has, each time, declined to commit to any of those visions as the real one. The flash forwards are always hypothetical. They are always tagged, explicitly or implicitly, as one possible future, not the future. They exist in a subjunctive tense. This could happen if things go a certain way, and they are always pulled back from before they can become canonical. The show returns to the permanent present, and the future is put back in the box. This creates a strange relationship with time. There is a version of the characters that the show has shown you the adults they become, the people the children turn into that you are not allowed to believe in. You have seen it, but you cannot hold it. The flash-forward episodes exist, and then they do not exist. The future happened, and then it did not. The possibilities were shown and then withdrawn. Lisa's wedding from season 6 is the most beloved of these episodes, and it is easy to understand why. The episode flash-forwards to 2010, a future that has since become the past, which gives the episode a time capsule quality it did not have when it aired, and shows Lisa as a 23-year-old woman who is engaged to an Englishman named Hugh. She is brilliant and principled and has become, more or less, the person the show always suggested she would become. She has a specific loneliness to her that is both sad and accurate. The episode's emotional center is Lisa and Homer. It is about the complicated grief of realizing that you have grown away from your father, that the person who raised you is not quite the person you need them to be now that you are grown, that love and compatibility are not the same thing, that you can love someone completely and still find that the version of yourself they know is not the version you want to inhabit. Lisa does not marry Hugh, in the end partly because of a conflict between Hugh and Homer, partly because she realizes that she would have to choose between the person she loves and the person she is. She chooses the person she is, and then she goes back to being 8 years old. The specific grief of that reset, the feeling of having been shown something and then having it taken away, is one of the show's most characteristic moves. It gives you the future and then restores the present. And the present feels slightly different for having been compared, even briefly, to the future. You know what Lisa becomes. You carry that knowledge into every subsequent episode of Lisa being 8. She is always 8, and she is always also, somewhere in your memory of the show, 23 and standing in a room trying to decide who she is. The flash forward in Bart to the Future, the one that depicts a President Trump, aired in the year 2000 is interesting for reasons beyond its prophetic reputation. The episode shows Bart as a middle-aged man who has become, more or less, the person you would expect Bart Simpson to become. Someone who has not quite managed to turn his potential into anything lasting, who is living in a kind of agreeable drift, who is getting by without getting anywhere. He is not a failure in any dramatic sense. He is just a person whose life has not yet organized itself around a purpose. He is Bart at 40, which is to say he is still Bart. The episode is melancholy in a way that its satirical reputation obscures. It is not primarily about Trump or about Lisa becoming president. It is about the fear of becoming the person you were always going to become, the fear that the adult version of yourself will be recognizable as a continuation of the child version, without the transformative rupture that you always expected to happen at some point and never quite does. There are also flash-forwards in the Treehouse of Horror episodes, which do not carry the weight of the main continuity and are therefore free to be more extreme. These range from the apocalyptic to the quietly domestic. Some show Springfield in the far future, after some catastrophe or triumph that has reorganized the town beyond recognition. Some show the family in old age, which the show renders with the specific gentleness of imagining something that can never actually happen. Homer old is an image the show returns to occasionally in these dream future contexts. He is slower, he is quieter, he has the particular quality of an old person who has made their peace with most things. He still loves Marge. He still reaches for the donut. He is, fundamentally and irreducibly, Homer, which means that whatever the future brings, he will meet it as himself, with the specific combination of obliviousness and warmth that has always defined him. That image, Homer old, Homer slow, Homer still, Homer is actually comforting. It says, the things that matter about him are durable. Time cannot take them. Age cannot take them. The specific quality of Homer Simpson, which is the specific quality of the person who loves without complication and suffers without self-awareness and finds joy in small things with an enthusiasm that never quite wears out, that survives whatever comes next. The flash-forwards tell you, over and over, the same thing. The family endures. In every possible future the show has imagined, they are still there, still together, still the Simpsons. And then the future is put back in the box, and they are 8 and 10 and 1 and middle-aged again, and Springfield is exactly as it was, and the permanent present resumes. It is enough. The knowledge that they endure is enough, even if you cannot hold it. Section 18, the quiet episodes. Not every episode of The Simpsons is loud. This might seem like an obvious statement, but it is actually somewhat surprising given the show's reputation. The Simpsons is known for chaos and speed, for jokes that land fast and keep moving, for plots that escalate in unexpected directions, for the particular energy of a well-constructed half-hour comedy working at full capacity. The default mode of a Simpsons episode is active, busy, moving forward. But scattered through the archive are episodes that are quiet, episodes that seem, almost deliberately, to slow down, episodes that linger in scenes longer than strictly necessary, that let characters sit with things instead of immediately processing them into comedy, that use silence and space as part of their vocabulary. These episodes are not always the most celebrated. They do not always have the most famous jokes, but they have a specific quality that the busier episodes lack. They feel inhabited. They feel like Springfield is a real place where real time passes. One such episode is And Maggie Makes Three from Season 6, which is structured as a flashback episode. Homer is recounting to the children how Maggie came to be. The story involves Homer having paid off his debt and finally being free to quit his job at the nuclear plant and go work his dream job at the bowling alley, and then Marge becoming pregnant again, and Homer having to return to the plant to afford the new baby, and the specific quiet devastation of having a dream interrupted by life. The episode plays this mostly for laughs, as you would expect, but the ending is one of the most gentle and affecting things the show has ever done. Homer explains that he covered up the motivation poster on his workstation, the one Burns put there to remind him that he has to work with photographs of Maggie, so that every time he looks at the thing that is supposed to remind him of his obligation and his humiliation, he sees his daughter instead. Every look at what he could not escape becomes a look at what he would not trade. The episode ends on that image. Homer at his workstation, the photographs of Maggie around him, and the voiceover line something like, "When I realized what the world did to me, I put up that reminder of what I really do it for." It is a simple sentiment. It is not a new sentiment. But the episode earns it by having spent 20 minutes establishing the specific weight of what Homer gave up, so the thing he got in exchange for it, not the thing that replaced the dream, but the thing that made the exchange worthwhile has the right mass when it arrives. There is also the episode Lisa's Substitute from Season 2, in which Lisa's teacher is temporarily replaced by a substitute named Mr. Bergstrom, voiced by Dustin Hoffman under a pseudonym. Mr. Bergstrom is the kind of teacher that every student who has ever struggled with feeling misunderstood has longed for. Someone who sees you clearly and tells you so, who treats your intelligence as a real thing, deserving real engagement, who makes you feel, for the duration of his class, that being the kind of person you are is actually fine. Lisa falls for him in the way that children fall for teachers who see them not romantically, but with the intensity of someone who has been recognized for the first time and does not know how to hold that recognition lightly. And then he leaves. He is a substitute. He was always going to leave. And Lisa, who knew this on some level, is not prepared for how it feels when it actually happens. The note he leaves her delivered at the train station as he departs is perhaps the single most famous piece of writing in the show's history. He has written, "You are Lisa Simpson," and he has left it at that. The entire instruction for Lisa's life, distilled to 6 words. You are yourself. And that is the whole of what you need to know. The episode is quiet throughout. It does not rush to the punchline. It lets the emotional content breathe. It allows Lisa to be sad and does not immediately resolve the sadness with a joke. It trusts the audience to sit with it. Homer's subplot in the same episode, in which he discovers that Bart is running for class president and gives him a speech about the power of the people, is played for broad comedy, and it is funny. But it also has a quality of genuine affection for Bart that runs underneath the jokes. Homer's enthusiasm for his son's campaign being the kind of enthusiasm that is not quite appropriate to the situation but is absolutely genuine. The quiet episodes of The Simpsons are the ones that most reward attention. They are the ones that feel least like television and most like something else, most like the actual experience of being a family, which is mostly quiet, mostly unremarkable, mostly composed of small moments that do not get scored with brass stings or pay off with laugh track. These are the episodes that linger, not because something exploded, because something was true. Let your body settle into the quiet. The night has that quality now, the specific quiet of a night that has gone on long enough to have finished with the day and not yet started worrying about tomorrow. Everything in between. A suspended moment of pure rest. The Simpsons has captured this moment more times than most shows ever try to. The quiet episodes are proof of that. They are the show knowing what it is doing and choosing to do it slowly and trusting you to stay. Section 19, the town meeting and the community. One of the most underrated recurring settings in The Simpsons is the town meeting. Springfield holds town meetings with remarkable frequency for a community that consistently demonstrates almost no capacity for organized collective action. The meetings happen in the town hall or the church or the community center or wherever the script determines that a large number of Springfield residents can most conveniently be assembled. And they follow a consistent pattern. An issue is raised, chaos ensues, someone makes an unexpected point, the issue is resolved in a way that addresses the surface problem while leaving the underlying one entirely intact. The town meeting is, in the show's universe, the primary mechanism of democracy. It is also one of the show's sharpest recurring jokes about democracy in practice, the idea that collective decision-making is the right process for resolving community issues, combined with the observable fact that collective decision-making produces outcomes that are mostly unpredictable, frequently absurd, and occasionally genuinely good. Springfield is not a well-governed town. This is established early and maintained consistently. Chief Wiggum provides law enforcement that is at best ineffective and at worst actively counterproductive. Mayor Quimby governs with a combination of corruption, cowardice, and accent that suggests he has absorbed every American mayor caricature ever drawn and incorporated them all without filtering. The school board, the city council, the various municipal agencies, they operate in the way that real bureaucracies operate, which is to say, with a combination of genuine effort and profound dysfunction, producing results that are better than nothing and worse than necessary. But the town meeting, as a fictional space, is interesting precisely because it brings all of Springfield's competing voices into the same room. The meetings are where you can see the full texture of the town's population, where the Flanders and the Homer, and the Ned and the Krusty and the groundskeeper Willie and the Professor Frink are all forced to share a space and a problem and figure out together, or not, what to do about it. The episode bearing the somewhat long title of Much Apu About Nothing is built around a town meeting that results in an anti-immigration ballot measure, and it handles this material with a combination of comedy and genuine moral weight that the show managed several times in its middle seasons. The meeting is funny, the political dynamics are recognizable, and underneath the comedy is a straightforward argument about what community is for and who belongs in it. Apu's storyline in that episode, the threat that the ballot measure represents to his ability to stay in Springfield, is treated with real care. Apu has been in Springfield for years. He knows the town. He is part of the town. The question of whether he belongs is not answered by the ballot measure. It is answered by what we know about him, by the decades of episodes in which he has been a fully realized presence in the community, by the simple fact of his being there. The episode makes its argument through character rather than through speech, which is the show's best method. It does not need to tell you that Apu belongs, because it has already shown you. The showing was always the argument. The town meetings also produced one of the show's most delightful running observations about mob behavior, that Springfield residents, who in their individual lives are mostly decent and mostly reasonable, become collectively irrational with remarkable speed and consistency. The transformation from concerned citizens to angry mob takes, in the show's rendering, approximately 3 to 4 minutes under the right conditions. All you need is a sufficient grievance, a person willing to stand up and shout, and the specific energy of a crowd that has been waiting for permission to be unreasonable. This is, of course, a cartoon exaggeration of real phenomena. Real mobs take longer and require more specific triggering conditions. But the underlying observation that collective behavior is governed by different rules than individual behavior, and that those rules are not always more rational or more virtuous, is accurate enough to be funny. The community of Springfield, taken as a whole, is one of the most complete fictional communities in American popular culture. It has the full range of personalities, perspectives, economic situations, and cultural backgrounds that a real American town would have, rendered in cartoon form, interacting with each other in the specific ways that a real American town's residents interact. Sometimes warmly, sometimes coldly, sometimes with the particular indifference that comes from sharing a space for so long that you have stopped seeing the people who share it with you. It is in this way very true to life. Let the town breathe around you, all its voices, all its meetings, all its collective decisions and collective forgettings. The community that holds together not because it is well organized or consistently virtuous, but because it is there, and it has always been there, and whatever happens on any given episode, it will be there next Sunday. Section 20, The Voice Actors and What They Built. The Simpsons is, at its most fundamental level, a collection of voices. Not voices in the metaphorical sense, though the show has many of those too, many perspectives and registers and tonal modes, but actual voices. The specific human voices that have inhabited these characters for decades, that have made them real in the specific way that only a voice can make a cartoon character real. The core voice cast of The Simpsons, Dan Castellaneta, Julie Kavner, Nancy Cartwright, Yeardley Smith, Harry Shearer, and Hank Azaria is the most collectively experienced group of voice actors in the history of American animation. Together, they have played these characters for over 30 years, through hundreds of episodes, through every tonal register the show has attempted. They have made the characters laugh and cry and argue and whisper and shout. They have done this, mostly, in a recording studio, usually alone, occasionally together, always committed to the specific reality of each moment, even when the moment was a cartoon joke about a donut. Dan Castellaneta's Homer is one of the defining vocal performances in American popular culture. The character's voice has changed slightly over the years. It was somewhat higher and more manic in the early seasons, has settled into something warmer and more familiar as the decades have passed. But the essential quality has remained consistent. A voice that is simultaneously ridiculous and genuine, that can deliver a pratfall sound effect and a moment of real emotion in the same breath. Castellaneta has spoken in interviews about the challenge of sustaining a character over this span of time, of keeping the voice fresh and the performance alive across hundreds of episodes. The fact that Homer is still recognizably Homer, still has the specific quality of Homer after all this time, is a testament to the care that Castellaneta has brought to it. Julie Kavner's Marge has a vocal texture that is immediately identifiable and almost impossible to describe accurately. It has a specific roughness to it, a quality that suggests both warmth and strain simultaneously. Kavner has said that she cannot maintain the voice for very long at a stretch without it becoming difficult. The voice itself, in this sense, is an expression of what Marge does. It carries a quality of effort, of something being held together through sustained application. Nancy Cartwright voices Bart, which is the most famous example of an adult woman playing a boy in American animation, a tradition that goes back much further than The Simpsons, but that the show has maintained most visibly. Cartwright has noted in interviews that the relationship between performer and character changes over decades, that Bart has become something other than a role, something more like a companion or a second identity that she inhabits when the recording begins. The emotional authenticity of Bart's more affecting moments, the crying in the dark after being bullied, the quiet admission that he would rather be himself, the specific sound of a boy who loves his mother but is not sure how to say so, comes from somewhere in Cartwright that is not entirely separate from the character she has been playing for 30 years. Yeardley Smith's Lisa is a voice that can convey intelligence and vulnerability simultaneously, and more to the point, can convey the specific quality of someone who is both the smartest person in the room and the most likely to have her feelings hurt. The voice has a slight edge to it, not unpleasant, just present, that is part of what makes Lisa's emotional moments so affecting. When the edge disappears, when the voice softens, you know something real is happening. Harry Shearer plays, among many others, Mr. Burns and Principal Skinner, which is remarkable when you consider how different those two characters are. Burns's voice is a specific kind of old money dryness, amused, contemptuous, precise, with a specific quality of pleasure in its own cruelty. Skinner's voice is something else entirely, the voice of a man who has been managing his own anxieties for a long time, whose formal manner is a defense rather than an expression, who is capable of genuine warmth that he cannot quite allow himself to show. Shearer finds both of these characters from the inside, which is what good voice acting is. Phil Hartman is worth mentioning again here, because his absence is still felt. Hartman brought a specific quality to Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz, a smoothness that contained an undercurrent of falseness, a performance of confidence that was always slightly too polished to be entirely genuine. That was both extremely funny and surprisingly poignant once you knew it was a performance. The characters he played were defined by the gap between what they appeared to be and what they were. Hartman was exceptionally good at making that gap legible. The show's voice work also includes the extraordinary guest performances we discussed earlier, and the remarkable number of supporting voices that have given texture to Springfield over the decades, the performers who voiced Apu and Principal Skinner and Groundskeeper Willie and Chief Wiggum and Sideshow Bob, and the hundreds of minor characters who have populated the show's crowd, scenes, and B-plots. Kelsey Grammer's Sideshow Bob is a special case. Grammer has played Bob in more than a dozen episodes across the show's history, and each time he has brought a combination of Shakespearean flourish and genuine menace that is unlike anything else the show has ever had. Bob's voice, theatrical, precise, capable of sudden violence in its tone, contains within it the character's entire history. The failed attempt at career, the thwarted ambition, the repeated imprisonments, the rake. Grammer plays Bob as a man who is fully aware of his own absurdity and fully committed to it, which is both very funny and strangely dignified. The voice actors are the true architects of Springfield. The writers create the words. The animators create the images. but the voices are what make the characters real in the way that matters real in the specific sense of being believed, of having an interior life that feels continuous even across episodes and decades, of being, in the only way a fictional character can be, present. They are still present. All of them. The voices go on in the archive, permanent and unchanging, speaking from the perpetual present of the episodes they inhabit, playing the same characters they have always played, in the same town they have always played them in. Springfield is full of their voices. Late at night, if you listen, you can almost hear them. Section 21, Springfield at 3 a.m. There are no episodes of The Simpsons set at 3 a.m. This is not a criticism. It is an observation about the show's temporal range. The show lives in the hours between about 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. It inhabits the time of school and work and dinner and television. Its stories are daylight stories, or evening stories, or the early night stories of a family that goes to bed at a reasonable hour. But Springfield at 3 a.m.? Springfield in the deepest, emptiest part of the night is worth imagining for a moment. Because the town is still there, even at 3 a.m., the cooling towers are still there, the streets are still there. The couch is still there, with the television still on, playing something for nobody. At 3 a.m., Homer is asleep on the couch. This is where Homer goes at 3 a.m. Not the bedroom, not the floor, but the couch, in front of the television, in the position of a man who has not decided to stay up and has also not decided to go to bed. He is just there. The television has been playing for hours. It is playing something now that has nothing to do with anything Homer would choose, because Homer stopped choosing around midnight and has been subject to the television's own momentum since then. At 3 a.m., Marge is asleep upstairs, but lightly. She is the kind of sleeper who is always slightly aware of what is happening around her, always monitoring, even in sleep, the sounds and temperatures and small atmospheric changes of the house she manages. If Homer were to make a significant noise, she would hear it. She would not necessarily go down, but she would hear it. At 3 a.m., Bart is asleep in a way that is almost theatrical, spread across his bed, in the posture of someone who hit the mattress with force and has not moved since. Bart sleeps with the totality of a child who has spent the day at maximum capacity and has nothing left for the night. His dreams are probably eventful. Lisa is asleep curled around her saxophone case, which is on the floor by her bed because she was practicing late, or she fell asleep while reading sheet music, or she had one of those evenings where the saxophone was the only thing that could manage what she was feeling, and she did not want to put it away. She sleeps more carefully than Bart. Her dreams are probably more organized. Maggie is awake. This is her time. The house is quiet. Nobody is watching. The pacifier moves in the slow, deliberate rhythm of a child who is thinking about something, processing something, filing it away for later. What Maggie knows about the house at 3 a.m. could fill several volumes that nobody will ever read. At 3 a.m. in Springfield, Ned Flanders is awake and in prayer. He is the kind of man who finds specific hours of the night for specific kinds of contemplation, and 3 a.m. is one of his hours. The prayer is quiet and sincere and, as always, receives no demonstrable response, which Ned treats as a feature rather than a bug. At 3 a.m., Mo is wiping down the bar. The tavern closed hours ago, technically, but Mo is still there. He is always still there. The bar does not quite feel like it is closed, even when it is. Mo moves through the empty room in the specific way of someone who has nothing to go home to, which is not quite the same as being unhappy. It is more like being at home in a place that is not technically your home, which is its own kind of belonging. At 3 a.m., Professor Frink is in his lab. He is always in his lab at 3 a.m. He has been there since sometime in the afternoon and will continue to be there until sometime in the morning, working on something that may or may not be ready to share with the world. The lab at 3 a.m. has a specific quality: quieter, more concentrated, the hum of the equipment more noticeable in the absence of everything else. At 3 a.m., the nuclear plant runs itself. The instruments tick. The rods sit in their adjusted positions. Whatever the plant has been releasing into the water and the air for decades, it is releasing it now, in the quiet of the night, without comment, without record, without anyone who would know what to write down even if they were watching. The town breathes. This is the Springfield you are in right now, the late-night Springfield, the 3 a.m. version, the one that exists between episodes in the gaps that the show never fills. The town is always here even when the camera is not. The family is always in those rooms, being themselves, doing whatever they do in the hours the show does not show you. You are in the same hour, the same quality of darkness, the same breathing house. There is something companionable in this. The knowledge that Springfield is out there, in the dark, also being quiet, also resting, also just present in the way that places are present in the middle of the night fully themselves, without audience, without performance, without the energy it takes to be the thing you are for other people. At 3 a.m., Springfield is just Springfield, and you are just you, and the night goes on. Section 22. The Final Loop. Why Springfield Keeps Pulling You Back. The Simpsons has been on television for longer than most marriages last, longer than most friendships, longer than most careers. It has been running in some form since 1987. When the Simpsons family first appeared as animated bumpers on The Tracy Ullman Show, short, crude little segments, barely 30 seconds long, that looked almost nothing like the show that would follow and contained, already, the essential notes of it. By any rational measure, the show should have been gone decades ago. The golden age was over by the mid-90s. The decline has been documented extensively, eulogized repeatedly, attributed to various causes by various critics. And yet the show continues, and people continue to watch it. And on Sunday night somewhere in America, a family is still gathering or not gathering, or gathering digitally, or watching alone in a dark room to spend time in Springfield. Why? That is the question worth sitting with tonight, in the quiet, as the rest of the night deepens around you. The obvious answer is nostalgia, and nostalgia is certainly part of it. People who grew up with the show have a relationship with it that is inseparable from their relationship with the time in which they grew up. To watch the early seasons is to inhabit, for 30 minutes, a version of the early 90s, not historically accurate, not even particularly realistic, but emotionally accurate. The texture of a Tuesday night in 1993. The specific way that laughter felt when it came from something on television that had genuinely surprised you. The sense of being exactly the right age for exactly the right thing. But nostalgia does not fully explain it. Plenty of shows inspire nostalgia. Few generate the sustained, sometimes obsessive engagement that The Simpsons does in its devoted viewers. There is something else going on. Let your breathing stay slow and deep. We are going somewhere interior now. Part of what keeps people coming back is the town itself. Springfield is one of the most complete fictional worlds in the history of popular culture. Not because it is realistic, it is explicitly unrealistic, explicitly a cartoon, explicitly impossible, but because it has been built, over decades, by hundreds of people who cared about it. Every writer who worked on the show added something to the town. Every animator who worked on a background added something. Every voice actor who found a new dimension in a recurring character, every director who chose a specific angle for a specific shot, every composer who scored a scene with something unexpected, all of them were building the same place. Springfield accumulated, and what it accumulated into is a place that feels, to its longtime viewers, more real than some real places, more familiar, more inhabited. The specific quality of a street you know so well that you stop seeing it. The deep familiarity that erases the need for attention because everything is already in memory. This is what longtime Simpsons viewers have with Springfield. You know what Moe's bar smells like, or you think you do? You know the weight of the air in Homer's living room. You know the specific quality of a Springfield morning. You do not know any of this. It is a cartoon. You have never been there, but the knowledge is there anyway, constructed from decades of visits, laid down in memory the way all repeated experiences are. This is what great fiction does at its best. It creates a knowledge that behaves like memory, a familiarity with things that never existed, structured the same way that familiarity with real things is structured, stored in the same places, accessed the same way. The Simpsons built that familiarity more thoroughly than almost any other fictional property in existence because it had more time. Because it came into your house every week for 30 years and added a small deposit to the account. Because it never required you to read anything, or travel anywhere, or pay for a ticket. It was just there, on the television, on Sunday nights. And something about the rhythm of Sunday nights, the particular quality of a Sunday evening, the awareness of the week approaching, the desire to stay in the warm room a little longer before the practical world reasserts itself, made Springfield the perfect destination. It was never challenging. It was never demanding. It asked only that you arrive and pay attention for a while. Breathe in, breathe out. The week can wait. There is also something in the show's relationship with time that creates its specific pull. Springfield exists in a kind of eternal present. The characters do not age. The year is never precisely specified. Technology updates, there are smartphones now, there is social media, but the fundamental dynamics remain fixed. Homer is always Homer. Marge is always Marge. Bart will always be 10. Lisa will always be 8. Maggie will always be 1. This is a source of occasional frustration. The show can never commit to change, can never let its characters truly grow. You can never follow the consequences of one episode into the next, but it is also a source of comfort. Springfield is always there. The door is always open. You can leave for 5 years or 10 and come back, and it will be exactly as you left it. The couch will be in the same place. The television will be on. Homer will be reaching for a beer. There is a version of this that is stagnation, and the show has certainly stagnated at times. But there is also a version of this that is sanctuary. The word comes from a root meaning holy, and the holy is partly characterized by its unchanged quality. The thing that is always the same, regardless of what changes around it. The fixed point. Springfield is a fixed point. And late at night, when everything else has been changing and the day has been full of things that required adaptation and response and adjustment and effort, the fixed point is where you go. The place that is always there. The channel you know. The theme music that means something. The couch is empty. There is room on it. The last thing worth saying about why Springfield keeps pulling you back is the family itself. The Simpsons are not an admirable family. They are not a model to emulate. Homer is irresponsible. Marge is occasionally enabling. Bart is a menace to civic order. Lisa is self-righteous in ways that, if she were not also genuinely right, would be insufferable. Maggie is, going by the evidence, the most capable of all of them. But they are a family. They are a family in the deepest, most functional sense. They stay together. They fight. They hurt each other. They misunderstand each other. They fail each other. And then they stay together. The staying is the point. The staying is what the show has always been about. Every episode ends with the family intact. Every betrayal is absorbed. Every catastrophe is survived. Homer comes home. Marge makes dinner. Bart does something. Lisa plays something. Maggie watches. The couch receives them all. This is the loop. Not a flaw in the narrative, a truth about family. The loop is the staying. The loop is the returning. The loop is the way that love, in practice, is less about peak moments and more about the habit of continuation, the decision, made again every morning, to still be there. In a world where many things do not stay, Springfield stays. That is why you keep coming back. Not for the jokes, though the jokes are good. Not for the satire, though the satire is often brilliant. Not for the celebrities, or the couch gags, or the treehouse of horror episodes, though all of these are wonderful in their own ways. You come back for the staying, for the family on the couch, together, in the warm yellow light of the television, for the town that is always there when you need it, for the sound of the theme music that means, you are home now, you can rest. Section 23. The last things before sleep. We have been in Springfield for a long time tonight. We walked the streets in the dark. We sat in the couch gag archive and watched 30 seconds of experiment after experiment. We followed Homer through his fog and his crayon and his brief, brilliant moment of knowing himself. We sat in the treehouse with the children and listened to stories that were scary and also safe. We watched the side characters living their minor lives in the windows of the buildings we passed. We listened to the television inside the television, and the show within the show, and the itchy and scratchy theme echoing back on itself. We sat with the dark moments that the show allowed to be dark. We walked the impossible geography. We heard the guest stars, Johnny Cash's Coyote, Ringo's gentle acknowledgement, Michael Jackson's secret warmth. We went through Bart's schemes and Marge's quiet strangeness, and the animals who live in the present tense. We heard the music. We remembered the recurring gags that became mythology. We imagined Springfield at 3 a.m. We have covered a lot of ground. And now we are here, at the end of the walk, at the last section, at the moment where the night has fully settled and the only thing left is to let it all go and drift. So let us do that. Slowly. The last things before sleep are the small things. Not the grand theories or the dark moments or the sophisticated satirical machinery. The small things that the show accumulated over decades and that lodged somewhere in the people who watched it. The specific way Bart says "ay caramba," which started as a catchphrase and became, over years of use, something more like a verbal reflex, a sound for when the situation has escalated past what any single English word can hold. The specific sound of Homer's filling in the blank with whatever he is thinking about eating. The specificity of the object varies, but the quality of the longing is always identical. Pure, simple, uncomplicated desire. There is something genuinely soothing about it. A man who knows what he wants and is not confused about it. The way Lisa holds her saxophone. The way Marge makes that throat-clearing sound when she has something to say that she is not entirely sure she should say. The way Burns's fingers steeple when he is about to be pleased by something. The way Ned's voice rises when he is trying extra hard to be positive. These are not jokes, they are textures. They are the accumulated product of decades of characters being themselves in enough different situations that the specific way they inhabit their own personalities has become fully visible, fully detailed, fully real. The way Homer laughs. The way he laughs at his own jokes, which is not always a good laugh, but is always a genuine one. The way he laughs at things that are not funny to anyone else, but are somehow, in the specific reality of Homer, hilarious to him. The laugh that sounds like it belongs to a man who has not been told that the thing is not funny and would not care if he had been. The way the show ends. Not any specific episode, but the general quality of a Simpsons ending. The problem resolved, the family back together, a last joke that lands quickly and then gives way to the credits. The music coming back in. The sense of something having completed a cycle and being ready to begin again. You have watched hundreds of these endings, if you have watched the show. They have accumulated in you. They are part of your relationship with the night, with the end of television, with the transition from watching to sleeping. Let them do their work now. The episode is ending, the music is coming back. The family is on the couch. The credits are rolling over the familiar Springfield skyline. The cooling towers visible against the darkening sky, the yellow houses with their lights on, the quick E-Mart still open, Moe's still there, the school dark and waiting. Homer is on the couch. He is not going anywhere. He is there. Marge is there too, beside him, close enough to touch, in the specific proximity of a marriage that has been through things and come out the other side of things and settled into a nearness that does not require constant acknowledgement. The kids are in bed. The dog is at the foot of the stairs. The cat is wherever the cat goes at night. The television is still on. It will be on all night. It plays into the dark room, sending its light across the carpet, across the coffee table, across Homer's face as he sleeps. The town is breathing. You are breathing. The night is doing what nights do when they are good, deepening, softening, carrying you gradually away from the day and toward the other place, the quiet place, the place you go when the body has finally agreed to rest. Springfield will be there when you come back. It always is. The theme music is there if you listen for it, very faint, very far away, but there. The 8 notes. The swelling strings. The sound of coming home. You are home. You can let go now. The Simpsons are fine. They will be fine. They have been fine for over 30 years, and they will be fine for whatever comes after that. The family is intact. The couch is there. The episode has ended, but the show goes on. Sunday after Sunday, week after week, in the permanent present of Springfield. And you are in the permanent present of wherever you are, in your bed, in your chair, in the soft dark that is your dark, and not any cartoon town's dark. Believery tonight, some of the warmth of that town, some of the feeling of having visited a familiar place and found it unchanged. Let that warmth carry you. The night is here, the town is quiet, the credits are rolling. Sleep well. Outrow, the lights going out in Springfield. It is late now. Springfield is quiet. The way a town gets quiet when most of its people have found their way to beds and couches and chairs, when the lights in the windows are going out one by one, when the streets are empty, and the distant hum of the nuclear plant is the only sound above the crickets and the occasional dog and the last few cars making their way home from wherever the night took them. Homer is on the couch. He fell asleep sometime during the evening news, he always does, and the television is still on, playing something he is not watching. The remote has fallen between the cushions. The light from the screen moves over his face in slow, shifting patterns. that would look almost meaningful to anyone watching. Marge is upstairs. The house is warm. Bart is in his room, on his back, staring at the ceiling. He has the particular quality of a child who has not quite accepted sleep yet, who is still arguing with it, still maintaining, internally, that there are things worth staying awake for. But the argument is losing. His eyes are heavier than he will admit. In a few minutes, he will stop arguing and just go under. And in the morning, he will not remember the transition. Lisa is already asleep, her saxophone on the floor beside the bed, her books piled on the nightstand. She was reading something when sleep took her. Now the book has slid gently to the floor and she has not noticed. Maggie is in her crib. Her pacifier moves in a slow, rhythmic way. She is dreaming something. No one knows what babies dream. Maybe Springfield. Maybe some version of it that is all primary colors and warmth and the specific safe feeling of being surrounded by people who love you. And outside, beyond the Simpsons house, the town stretches in every direction that a cartoon town can stretch. The school is dark. Moe's Tavern is dark. The quick E-Mart glows. The nuclear plant pulses with its own internal light. The cooling towers stand against the sky, patient and still. The streets are empty. The air is that specific quality of late-night air, slightly colder than the air was 2 hours ago, with a clarity that comes after the day's heat has lifted. Somewhere, a dog is barking at something that is not there. Somewhere, a light is still on in a window, and a minor character is still awake, living their minor life. Springfield breathes. If you are still awake, if you are still here, somewhere on the edge of sleep, following these words through the dark, then you have been in the town for a long time tonight. You have walked its streets and visited its places and spent time with its people. You have been in the treehouse and in the tavern and in the kitchen where Marge stands after everyone else has gone to bed. The town is grateful for your company. Springfield has been many things over the decades. It has been a satire and a playground and a political document and a piece of pop culture archaeology and an accidental archive of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. It has been brilliant and ordinary and confused and inspired. It has been everything a thing can be when it lives long enough. But most of all, it has been a home. A place you could visit when your own home felt complicated. A place where the lights were on and something was familiar and the family was, once again, somehow okay. The family is okay. The lights are going out, one by one. The theme music is playing somewhere, very quietly, so quietly you can barely hear it. The 8 notes, the swell. The sound of coming home. Rest now. Springfield will be here tomorrow. It always is. That is the whole point. Thank you for spending this time in Springfield. If you found your way to sleep somewhere in here in the couch gags, or the crayon episode, or the quiet streets at the end, then this did exactly what it was supposed to do. If you have requests for the next sleep narration, leave them below. And if you are watching this in the small hours of the morning from somewhere in the world, drop your location and time in the comments. There is something special about knowing people are drifting off to this in different time zones, different seasons, different kinds of dark. Rest well wherever you are. End of script. Extended section. The education of Springfield. School is one of the central institutions of Springfield, and it is, by any functional measure, not working. This is not a criticism the show makes once and moves on from. It is a condition that is built into the texture of every episode set inside Springfield Elementary. A low-level institutional dysfunction that runs below everything. Like the water table, invisible but shaping everything above it. The school is underfunded. This is stated repeatedly and demonstrated constantly. The art budget has been cut, then cut again. The music program has been reduced to 1 saxophone and a shared clarinet. The science equipment dates from decades past. The library has gaps where books used to be. The gymnasium is scheduled so tightly that some classes never get to use it at all. And yet, inside this institution, with its crumbling infrastructure and its overworked teachers and its perpetually insufficient resources, things happen. Children learn things. Not always the things they are supposed to learn, not the things that appear on the standardized tests that the school dreads, but things, real things, things that stay with them. Lisa learns things she does not intend to learn. She goes to school every day with a specific agenda, books to read, concepts to master, a place in the intellectual hierarchy she intends to maintain, and she comes home having also learned something else, something sideways, Something that happened in a hallway or a cafeteria or the corner of a classroom where the teacher was not looking. Springfield Elementary is good at the oblique lesson, the one you do not see coming. Bart learns things he does not admit to learning. His relationship with school is adversarial in a way that has become its own kind of education. He has learned a great deal about institutions, about authority, about the specific mechanics of how rules are enforced and where the gaps are, and what happens when you fill the gaps with a person who is too creative and too energetic and has no particular interest in going wherever the institution is. Pointing. He has learned more about human nature than almost any other student in his year. He has just not learned it in a form that converts to a grade. The teachers are a study in their own right. Mrs. Krabappel, whom we have already spent time with, is the most fully realized of them, but the school has other teachers who are worth a moment. The gym teacher, who exists mainly to impose standards of physical performance on children who did not ask to be physically performed at, has the specific energy of a person whose professional ideal, the physically excellent child. The well-coordinated student is constantly thwarted by the reality of actual children, who are mostly uncoordinated and deeply uninterested in being otherwise. There is also the rotating cast of substitute teachers, who always arrive with a different energy and usually leave having been either defeated by the children or transformed by them. The substitute teacher format is one the show returns to because it allows the introduction of new dynamics, a new adult who does not yet know how Springfield works, who is still operating under the assumption that the rules of normal education apply here, and then the gradual process by which Springfield adjusts that assumption. Mr. Bergstrom, as we discussed, is the most celebrated of these substitutes, but there have been others who carried specific things. A science substitute who was genuinely excited about science and spent half a lesson igniting things, and spent the other half explaining why the first half was actually educational. An art substitute who had her own work shown in a gallery and brought that world briefly into contact with the school's world, producing a confusion that resolved unexpectedly into genuine interest. The school also functions as the social world of the children in ways that the show has explored with some care. The hierarchies of the playground are as real as any adult power structure, and in some ways more honest children do not yet have the tools to disguise the distribution of status. Bart sits near the top of the child hierarchy, which gives him a kind of freedom and also a kind of trap. The freedom to do what he wants, and the trap of being the person who does what he wants, which is also the person who is always expected to do what he wants, which leaves very little room to be anything else. Nelson Muntz is a character who started as the villain of the school's social world and became, over time, something considerably more complex. Nelson bullies. This is his established function. But the show has also, over the decades, given Nelson a home life that explains and contextualizes the bullying without excusing it, a home that is, by any reasonable standard, inadequate, with a mother who is absent in a specific and sad way and a father who is absent in a different specific and sad way, and Nelson navigating all of this by being large and threatening and scary, because being large and threatening and scary is the one thing he has figured out how to be. There is a specific episode that shows Nelson's home without the bullying frame, that strips away the function he plays in Bart's world and just shows him in his own world, and the loneliness of it is not played for easy emotion. The show does not ask you to feel sorry for Nelson in a way that requires you to forgive the bullying. It just shows you the situation and lets you hold both things, Nelson the bully and Nelson the child who became a bully for reasons that are comprehensible. The school, at the end of the day, after the buses have left and the last teacher has gone home and the building is quiet, is one of those Springfield spaces that has a specific after-hours quality. Empty halls that were recently full, lockers that were recently slammed. The specific quality of a place that is temporarily unoccupied by the thing that gives it meaning. The building persists in that stillness. All its years of lessons given, and lessons absorbed, and lessons refused, and lessons misunderstood, and lessons that landed sideways and took years to unfold into something useful. All of it happening inside those walls, across all the episodes and all the seasons, in the permanent present of the show. The building is still there, at 3 a.m., in the dark, empty and patient, waiting for morning. Extended section. The many deaths of Hans Mollman. There is a man in Springfield who dies all the time. Hans Mollman, the tiny, elderly, Nearly blind man who appears in the background of Springfield scenes and exists primarily to suffer, has been killed on screen more times than any other character in the history of American animation. He gets hit by cars. He gets crushed by objects. He gets buried alive. He gets eaten by animals. He gets struck by lightning. He gets incinerated. He walks into traffic and disappears under wheels. He is, by conservative estimate, the most frequently deceased character in the history of the medium. And then he shows up in the next episode, completely fine. No explanation, no resurrection scene, no acknowledgement that anything unusual happened. He just appears again, small and fragile and wearing his hat, ready to be killed again in some fresh and creative way. This is, on its surface, a running gag. Haha, Molman died again. The repetition is the joke, the way the repetition of anything becomes a joke at a certain frequency. You see it once and it is a surprise. You see it again and it is a callback. You see it 10 times and it is a tradition. You see it 30 times across 30 years and it has become, without anyone planning this outcome, a piece of mythology. But Molman's repeated deaths are also interesting under the lens of the theories the show has generated around itself. If Springfield is a contaminated zone, if the radiation from the nuclear plant has fundamentally altered the biology of its residents, then Molman might represent the most extreme case of mutation the town contains. A man whose cellular structure has been so thoroughly transformed by decades of nuclear exposure that his body can reconstitute itself after fatal trauma. Not invulnerability, he is clearly hurt each time. Clearly damaged, but regeneration. A kind of cartoon immortality that is also, every time, a cartoon death. There is also the detail that Molman once mentioned his age as 31. 31. A man who looks like he is in his 80s or 90s. A man whose appearance suggests decades of hard living accumulated into a single, small, fragile body is actually 31 years old. Which means something about Springfield's environment has aged him catastrophically beyond his years, has taken a man in the early prime of his life and produced something that looks like its conclusion. The same environment that keeps killing him and allowing him to return has also apparently accelerated his aging by 50 years. Both things are true simultaneously. Springfield did this to him, and Springfield is also the place where he keeps coming back. This is, when you think about it, a fairly complete metaphor for what the town does to everyone who lives in it. It ages you and it sustains you, it damages you, and it keeps you going. It takes something from you that you cannot get back and also somehow keeps you here. Molman's attitude toward all of this is never clearly established, because Molman does not really have attitudes that get explored in depth. He is a background character. His interiority, if he has one, is not something the show has time for. He exists to appear, and to die, and to reappear. But there is one thing we know about him. He comes back, every time. After every fall, every crush, every fire, everything that should be the end of him. He comes back and he is wearing his hat and he is walking through Springfield in the careful, slightly hunched way of a person who has good reason to be careful and is being careful anyway. That is not nothing. That is, in its small cartoon way, something. Extended section. What Lisa learned. Lisa Simpson is 8 years old, and she already knows more than she can comfortably carry. This is her defining condition, the gap between what she understands and what the world around her seems to understand. The gap between what she knows is right and what the people who are supposed to know better actually do. The gap between the person she is trying to become and the environment that is trying to make her something else. She goes to school, and school is insufficient. She reads books, and the books open doors that nobody else in her family has the equipment to follow her through. She plays the saxophone, and the saxophone is the one place where the gap closes, where what she knows and what she can do and what the world can receive from her are all the same size at the same time. The saxophone is worth dwelling on. Lisa chose it or the show chose it for her, which amounts to the same thing, and it is an interesting choice. The saxophone is not a classical instrument. It is a jazz instrument, a blues instrument, an instrument that sits at the intersection of formal training and improvisation, of structure and spontaneous expression. It is the instrument that best represents what Lisa is, deeply trained, formally intelligent, but most alive when she is playing something that is not quite on the page. Her musical moments are among the show's most genuinely affecting. There is an episode in which she plays something alone in her room, late at night. And the music is good, not cartoon good, not sitcom good, but actually good in the way that Yeardley Smith's performance and the show's music department work together to produce something that sounds like an 8-year-old who is gifted playing something that matters to her. The note hangs in the room after she stops. You feel it. Lisa's relationship with activism, with the persistent conviction that the world is wrong in specific, correctable ways, and that someone needs to keep pointing this out even when nobody wants to hear it, is one of the show's most honest portraits of a particular kind of person. The activist who is right but not always effective. The idealist who keeps bumping into the specific resistance that institutions offer to the idealism that might change them. The child who genuinely believes that people will do better if they know better, and who keeps discovering, episode after episode, that knowing is not the mechanism that changes things. She is not wrong about this. The world is wrong in the ways she identifies. The people she argues with are often doing the wrong thing for the reasons she says they are doing it. She wins the argument, theoretically, in the realm of ideas. In every episode, she does not always win the argument in the realm of outcomes, but she keeps making it. This persistence is what makes Lisa, in the end, the show's most quietly heroic character. Not heroic in the way of action or adventure. Heroic in the specific, unsexy, exhausting way of continuing to care about the right things in a world that keeps offering you reasons to stop caring. Heroic in the way of saying the thing that needs to be said when nobody is ready to hear it, and then saying it again next week and the week after. The show has not always known what to do with this. There are episodes where Lisa's activism tips into self-righteousness in a way that the show treats as a character flaw, and it is a character flaw, the specific flaw of someone who is right, but who is right loudly, who does not always leave room for the people she is trying to convince to find their own way to the conclusion. This is a real thing that happens to people who care a lot about the right things. The caring can crowd out the space that other people need to do their own thinking. But the show is also clear, more often than not, that the self-righteousness is not the point. The caring is the point. The persistence is the point. The fact that Lisa Simpson, in the permanent present of Springfield, is still 8 years old and still paying attention and still raising her hand when the question is asked and the room would rather pretend the question was not that is the point. She is the person in the show who cannot stop looking, even at the end. Even when the episode is over and the credits are rolling and everyone else has stopped looking. Lisa is still there, still paying attention, still holding the knowledge that the fish have 3 eyes and the plant is upstream, and somebody should be asking questions. You do not have to hold that knowledge tonight. You can set it down for a few hours. Lisa will hold it while you rest. She always does. Let her. Extended section. The Long Road, to and from Mr. Burns. Montgomery Burns is one of the great villains of American popular culture, and he is also one of its most peculiar comic creations, and he is also, depending on the episode, something that is not quite either of those things, something more like a force of nature, or a system of power given a human face, or a walking argument about what wealth does to a person over a very long time. He was born in the late 1800s. The show has never been precise about the year, because the show is never precise about anything involving time, but the implication of various episodes is that Burns has personal memories of things that happened before the turn of the 20th century. He has mentioned the Gilded Age in terms that suggest familiarity. He has referenced things from the early 1900s as things he was present for. He has been alive for approximately as long as America's industrial era, and he has been a part of that era, not a casual bystander, but an active participant. Someone who shaped things and was shaped by things and who stands, at this moment in the show's timeline, as a kind of living museum of everything that American capitalism has been. He is kept alive by weekly radiation treatments. This is established in an episode that plays it mostly as a joke. The reveal that the alien Homer saw in the woods was actually Mr. Burns, glowing from his treatment, looking like something from another world, but the implications of it are extensive. Burns requires regular medical intervention to remain alive. Without the treatments, his system shuts down within a week. He is, in a sense, the most dependent character in the show. For all his wealth and power, he needs something that has to be administered on a precise schedule, and without it, he is gone. This dependency shapes his relationship with Smithers in ways the show has explored over many years. Smithers is not just an assistant, not just a devotee. He is, functionally, Burns's medical infrastructure. He manages the schedule, he ensures the treatments happen. He monitors Burns's condition with the vigilance of someone who understands that his attention is the difference between the man living and dying. The question of whether this is love is one the show has danced around for decades without answering. Smithers loves Burns. This is not ambiguous. The show has made it explicit across many episodes. But the love exists alongside the functional dependency in a way that makes it hard to separate the two. Does Smithers love Burns? Or does he love the person whose survival requires him? Would the devotion continue if Burns were not also the thing that needs him most? The show does not answer this. It is not supposed to answer this. The answer would collapse the question, and the question is more interesting than any answer would be. Burns's relationship with Springfield is also more complicated than it first appears. He owns the power plant. He controls the town's electricity. He employs a significant portion of the town's working population. He has bought elections, influenced local government, and shaped the physical and economic landscape of the town to suit his interests. By any conventional measure, he is the villain of Springfield's story, and yet, the show occasionally produces episodes in which Burns is not quite a villain, in which his cruelty is softened by some flash of unexpected vulnerability, or in which his power is revealed to be more fragile than it appears, or in which he does something that is not quite good but is not quite bad either. There is an episode in which he tries to reconnect with a bear he once had as a child, and the effort is both funny and faintly touching. There is an episode in which he goes broke, briefly, and the experience of having nothing is so disorienting and frightening that it produces something almost like compassion in the viewer, who has been rooting against this man for years, and suddenly finds that even he looks small when the money is gone. Burns without money is just a very old man who is frightened. That is not nothing. That is, in its way, the show doing what it does best, refusing to let the easy categorization stand, insisting on the complication, finding the human thing inside the monster. Burns will probably outlive everyone we know. The treatments will continue. Smithers will continue to manage the schedule. The plant will continue to run, and to leak, and to provide Springfield with the electricity that powers everything, including the television that Homer is watching right now, asleep on the couch. In the warm light of the evening, the plant is upstream. The water flows down. The town drinks what the river gives it. And Burns goes on. Extended section Sideshow Bob and the question of redemption. Sideshow Bob has been trying to kill Bart Simpson since 1991 and has not succeeded once in over 30 years of attempts. This is one of the show's defining running stories, the most durable villain-hero relationship in the series, the clearest case of the show committing to a recurring conflict across decades of episodes. Every Sideshow Bob episode is essentially the same story. Bob is released from prison, or escapes from prison, or plots from inside prison, and pursues Bart with elaborate and increasingly theatrical plans, and fails, and returns to custody. The formula is fixed. The pleasure is in the variation. Robert Underdunk Terwilliger Jr. is one of the most unlikely great characters in American animation. He began as a joke, the sidekick on Krusty's show, who is less famous and less loved and more intelligent than the clown he assists, and became something genuinely complex over the course of many episodes. He is educated, cultured, capable of quoting Shakespeare in full, capable of planning schemes of genuine ingenuity, capable of the kind of theatrical self-presentation that turns even his failures into performances. He is also utterly, repeatedly, completely undone by Bart Simpson, who is 10 years old and whose primary skill in these confrontations is the ability to notice that Bart is about to be murdered and to do something about it. The show has played with the question of whether Bob can be redeemed. There have been episodes in which he tries. There was an episode in which he moved to a small Italian town with his family and seemed, briefly, to have found something like peace, a life outside the obsession, a life that was not organized around the murder of a child. And then Bart showed up, because the show needed Bart to be there, and the old dynamic reasserted itself. The question the show keeps raising and declining to answer is this: is Bob's villainy a choice, or has it become something else? Has the obsession with Bart outlasted any practical purpose it might once have had and become simply what Bob is? Is he a man who wants to kill Bart, Or has wanting to kill Bart become the organizing principle of his existence in a way that is now inseparable from who he is? The tragedy of Sideshow Bob, and there is a tragedy there, under the comedy, under the Kelsey Grammer theatrical brilliance, is that he is more intelligent than the situation he is in. He is too smart for Springfield. He is too educated for this conflict. He is capable of more than trying to murder a 10-year-old, and he knows this, and knowing it does not seem to help him. There is a specific episode, brother, from another series, from Season 8, in which Bob's brother Cecil arrives, and the episode reveals that Cecil has always been jealous of Bob, that the sibling dynamic between them is the original wound that produced everything that followed. Cecil wanted the Sideshow Bob job. Cecil was passed over. The wound of being passed over has organized Cecil's life the way the wound of being framed for something he did not do organized Bob's. The episode is one of the show's best precisely because it gives Bob something he almost never gets: a context, a reason, a history that explains, without excusing, how he became what he became. He is not a monster. He is a person with a wound, and the wound has produced a monster, and the monster is still capable of the moments of grace and dignity that the wound has not yet managed to exclaim entirely. At the end of the episode, Bob and Bart work together to stop Cecil, which is one of the show's great structural pleasures, the temporary alliance between people who are usually at war, the moment when the thing that divides them matters less than the thing they are both trying to prevent. They work well together. They are, it turns out, effective in combination. And then they go back to their usual configuration, because the show needs them to, because the dynamic is too good to abandon. Bob is back in prison, or back on his way to prison. Bart is safe, for now. The leaves on the rake are still there, waiting for the next episode. The formula will reset. The story will begin again. This is, of course, the show describing itself. This is the show's permanent present looking directly at the camera. The story will begin again. It always does. And starting again is not a failure of the story. It is the story. The loop is the point. Let your breathing go slow and deep. The loop is the point. Extended section: Springfield's relationship with fame and celebrity. Springfield is a town that is deeply, almost pathologically, impressed by celebrity. This is established early and returned to often. When a famous person appears in Springfield, the town responds with an intensity that is both completely understandable and completely disproportionate. The famous person transforms, by their presence, the ordinary spaces they move through. They make the diner more interesting. They make the school more interesting. They make Moe's more interesting, which is remarkable, because Moe's is not typically the kind of place that becomes more interesting by proximity to fame. The town's relationship with celebrity is one of the show's sharpest ongoing observations about American culture. Springfield is not particularly sophisticated about its famous visitors. It does not engage with them as complex human beings, or as artists with interesting bodies of work, or as people who have lived interesting lives. It primarily engages with them as famous. The fact of being known is the thing that matters, and the fact of being known changes how everything around you feels. This is, of course, a very accurate description of how fame works in practice. The famous person does not actually transform the diner. The diner is the same diner, but the town's attention to the famous person transforms the diner in the experience of everyone in it. The presence of someone who is watched by millions makes ordinary moments feel watched by proxy. Homer's interactions with celebrities are particularly interesting because Homer has two speeds when it comes to fame. Either he is completely oblivious to who he is talking to, engaging with a world-famous person exactly as he would engage with anyone, because he either does not recognize them or does not process the significance, or he is completely overwhelmed by it, reduced to something embarrassing and helpless by the mere proximity to somebody famous. The obliviousness mode is often the funnier one. There is something genuinely funny about Homer talking to a celebrity as if the celebrity is just a person, about the celebrity being slightly disoriented by this, about the celebrity occasionally finding it refreshing. The famous person who does not get treated like a famous person for 10 minutes and feels something that might be relief. The show has also occasionally explored the other side of celebrity, what it costs, what it takes away, what the person inside the fame is doing while the fame does its thing in public. The episode about Krusty is the obvious example, but there are others. The episode about a famous politician who has been performing one version of himself for so long that he is no longer entirely sure who the person underneath the performance is. The episode about a musician who got famous young and has been managing the consequences of that early fame ever since. These episodes are gentler than you might expect. The show does not pile on the famous. It finds the human being inside the fame and treats them with the same combination of warmth and gentle absurdity that it extends to everyone. Because everyone in Springfield is, in some sense, performing a version of themselves. Everyone has a public face and a private one. The gap between those two faces, the gap that is the secret of Krusty and of Burns and of Skinner, who used to be Tamzarian, is the gap that the show has always been most interested in exploring. The famous person is just a more visible version of the universal condition. The gap is bigger, the performance more practiced, the consequences of the gap being revealed more significant. But the gap itself is the same gap that everyone navigates every day, in every town, in every ordinary life. Springfield is not impressed by celebrities because it is naive. It is impressed by them because it recognizes something familiar in the distance between what they appear to be and what they are. It recognizes the effort. It knows what effort looks like. Most of its residents are making the same effort in smaller arenas every single day. Let that thought carry you. The effort that goes into being, publicly, the person you are. The quiet work of showing up as yourself in the spaces where you are expected to show up. The way this effort becomes so habitual that you eventually stop noticing you are doing it. You can stop doing it now, for a few hours, for the rest of the night. The performance is over. The audience has gone home. You can just be whatever you actually are in the dark. Extended section, the neighborhood as character. 742. Evergreen Terrace is an address that millions of people have heard more times than their own address. This is a strange thing, when you think about it, a fictional address, on a fictional street, in a fictional town that does not appear on any map, that has become one of the most recognizable pieces of address information in the world. If you asked people who have watched The Simpsons to tell you where the family lives, most of them would know. The number, the street name, the specific quality of the house on that specific street, the neighborhood around that address is one of the show's most carefully maintained fictional geographies. We know Ned's house is next door and that it is slightly better kept. We know the Lovejoys are in the neighborhood and that the Hibbert family is not far. We know that the neighborhood has a certain economic register, not wealthy, not poor, solidly lower to middle, the kind of neighborhood where everyone has a lawn and a car and the occasional unexpected expense causes genuine anxiety. The neighborhood functions as a kind of chorus for the main family's story. It is the environment that responds to what happens to The Simpsons, that reflects it and sometimes amplifies it. When Homer does something visible, the neighborhood sees it. When Marge does something notable, the neighborhood has opinions. The neighborhood is always watching, in the specific way that neighborhoods watch not maliciously, mostly just attentively, because people who live close together are always somewhat involved in each other's business, whether they intend to be or not. Ned Flanders as a neighbor is the show's central exploration of this dynamic. He is the ideal neighbor in all the ways that matter. Operationally, he is helpful, he is available, he does not cause trouble, he keeps his property in order, and he is also, in ways that matter interpersonally, sometimes too much. Too available, too cheerful, too persistently good. There is a quality to living next door to perfection that is its own kind of pressure, a reminder of the gap between what you are and what the neighbor next door has apparently managed to become. Homer responds to this pressure by largely ignoring it, which is his response to most pressures. He likes Ned well enough when not actively annoyed by him. He has borrowed things from Ned that he has never returned. He has borrowed the lawnmower, the ladder, the tools. He has borrowed money. He has borrowed goodwill on so many occasions that the account should be empty, but Ned keeps extending more. The show understands that good neighbors are a form of infrastructure, like roads or water systems or the electrical grid, which in Springfield's case runs through Burns's plant. Neighbors are part of what makes a place livable. You do not always notice them when they are working well. You notice them when they are not. Springfield's neighborhoods are always working well in this sense. The social infrastructure is intact. The people who live near each other know each other, help each other, occasionally drive each other toward the verge of insanity, and then go back to being people who live near each other. The cycle continues. This is not a small thing in a country where neighborhoods have become increasingly anonymous, where the people who live next door to each other do not necessarily know each other's names. Springfield's specific, textured community where everyone knows Ned and everyone knows Homer, and everyone has opinions about both of them, is a portrait of something that is less common than it used to be and is missed more than most people will admit. Late at night on Evergreen Terrace, the street is quiet. The houses are dark except for the lights that are always on, the ones that stay on through the night because someone left them on or someone was not ready to turn them off. The lawns are damp with the night's dew. The cars are in their driveways. The neighborhood is resting. Extended section. What the show knew about America. The Simpsons has always been, at some level, a show about America. Not America the nation, with its history and politics and geopolitical situation, though the show has touched all of those things. America the experience, the specific texture of living in a particular kind of American place, with particular American institutions, particular American economic anxieties, particular American pleasures. The donut and the diner and the church and the school and the factory and the television and the backyard and the car in the driveway. The whole everyday American life, rendered in yellow. The show knows things about America that it sometimes knows before America knows them about itself. It knew early that the nuclear family was more fragile than its cultural centrality suggested. It knew that the institutions that were supposed to support families, schools, workplaces, local government, churches were failing at that support in ways that were becoming increasingly hard to paper over. It knew that the economic anxiety of the lower middle class was real and persistent and not adequately addressed by either political party, though the show tried to stay even-handed about political targets. It knew that celebrity was becoming a replacement for other kinds of meaning, and that the replacement was not working very well. The show knew that the American dream, the idea that hard work and good values and a certain amount of luck would produce a comfortable, stable, meaningful life, was, for many people, not delivering. That Homer worked hard at an important job and still lived with the persistent awareness that one unexpected expense could destabilize everything. That Marge managed their household with skill and care and still felt the specific exhaustion of a person whose contributions were structurally undervalued. And the show knew, perhaps most importantly, that people continued to live their lives in the presence of all this knowing. That the gap between what was supposed to be true and what was actually true did not prevent the family from gathering on the couch and watching television together. That the problems were real and the warmth was also real, and these two things coexisted not because one canceled out the other, but because life does not let you choose only one thing to be true at a time. This is the show's deepest knowledge, and its most American knowledge. The ability to hold contradiction. The ability to find joy in circumstances that do not fully warrant it. The ability to love people who frustrate you in your specific, warm, ongoing way. The ability to sit on the couch after everything and just be together. That is what America does, at its best. And The Simpsons is a portrait of that across every episode, across every season, across all the years. The portrait is still being painted. The show is still running. The family is still on the couch. And somewhere in the country, someone is watching them right now, late at night, finding something familiar in the yellow faces and the blue hair and the four fingers. Finding something that looks, from a certain angle, like home. Final extended section, the morning in Springfield. The sun comes up in Springfield the way it comes up everywhere, without asking, without announcement, just happening in the slow way that things happen when they are inevitable. By the time the sky begins to lighten, Homer has been asleep on the couch for hours. The television has been playing into the dark for hours. The light from it has been the only light in the room, and it has been doing its quiet work running through the cable schedule, playing infomercials and old films and news programs that nobody is watching, keeping the room from going entirely dark. The first light from outside begins to compete with the television light. It is paler, bluer, cooler. It comes in through the window at a low angle and lies across the floor in the specific way that early morning light lies across things tentative, uncommitted, still feeling out whether the day is actually going to happen. Homer does not wake up. He will not wake up for a while. The show does not require Homer to be awake for the sunrise, and Homer would not choose to be awake for the sunrise if given the option. The sunrise happens without him. This is fine. Most sunrises happen without most people. They are not diminished by the inattention. They happen because they happen, with or without an audience, complete and indifferent and beautiful. The birds begin, in Springfield, the way birds begin everywhere. A single one, somewhere in the trees of Evergreen Terrace, testing the air with a few notes. A pause. A response from somewhere farther away. Gradually, over 15 or 20 minutes, the sound builds into the specific texture of a morning. Multiple voices, multiple locations, the whole sonic landscape of the neighborhood waking up. Ned Flanders will be the first person awake. He is always the first person awake. His morning routine is precise and established. Prayer, then exercise, then breakfast, then the day. By the time Homer stumbles into the kitchen looking for donuts, Ned will have already been awake for 2 hours and completed more of his day than Homer will complete all day. This is their relationship, at its most structural. Ned doing everything right, Homer barely managing to get started, and both of them occupying adjacent lots on the same street, neighbors, for all the good it does them. Lisa will be the second one awake. She will have been thinking, in that half-awake state before full consciousness, about something she read or something she heard or some problem that she started working on yesterday and did not finish. She will come down to the kitchen with the problem already partway solved, which means she will be distracted through breakfast in a way that Marge accepts and Bart finds annoying. Bart will be dragged awake by necessity school, or the smell of food, or Marge calling upstairs, or some combination of all three. He will arrive in the kitchen looking like someone who was interrupted mid-adventure. His hair will be worse than usual. He will eat whatever is in front of him with the focused enthusiasm of someone who has not yet started worrying about the day. Maggie will be brought down by Marge. The transition from crib to morning, handled with the practical efficiency of someone who has done this many times. Maggie will survey the kitchen from her high chair with the calm, comprehensive attention of someone who is taking notes. Marge will have been awake for 20 minutes already, moving through the morning preparation with the specific competence of someone for whom this routine has become entirely automatic. She does not need to think about any of it. Her body knows what to do while her mind is somewhere else, thinking about the day, about what needs to happen, about the quiet things she is always thinking about in the spaces between the things that are happening. Homer will arrive last, a coffee mug already in his hand in a way that suggests he found and filled it without fully waking up. The family is assembled. The morning is underway. This scene, not any specific scene from any specific episode, but the general scene, the template of a Springfield morning, has been happening in variations for 36 years. The family comes together in the kitchen. The day begins. The episode, if there is going to be an episode, is about to start. But for now, for this last moment before the day begins and the plot asserts itself, there is just the kitchen and the family and the morning light coming in through the window and the sound of Springfield waking up outside. This is the beginning of things. It is also where the show always returns to. The family assembled, the day about to start, the specific warmth of people who know each other gathered in the same room. The sun is up. Springfield is awake. The day is here. And you, wherever you are still in the quiet. Still in the dark, or the near dark, or the half-light of a room where the window is beginning to lighten. Still here, at the end of the night, take a breath. The day will come when it comes. For now, rest. You have been in Springfield all night. You have walked its streets and visited its people and followed the show through its bright moments and its dark ones and its long stretches of just being itself. The town is here. The family is here. The couch is here. You can stay as long as you need to. There is always room.